The grand hall fell silent as Nyravale touched her belly and smiled. "I carry the Duke's true heir," she announced, voice ringing off marble columns, while the Duchess, well, she let the pause linger like poison. Around the room, nobles froze mid-conversation. Duchess Arden stood at the far end, her 3-week-old son asleep in her arms, and felt the ground crack beneath her feet. In a world where bloodlines determined everything, titles, wealth, survival, that single sentence was a death warrant, not just for her, but for her child. Tristan wouldn't meet her eyes. That's when Arden knew. This wasn't gossip. This was war. If you want to see how a woman turned a scandal into a revolution, stay until the end and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The first night after the accusation, Arden didn't sleep. She stood by the window of her chambers, the baby, Edmund, cradled against her chest, and watched the courtyard below. Lanterns flickered, guards changed shifts. Life continued as if the world hadn't just collapsed. But it had. She'd felt it the moment Nyra spoke those words in the grand hall, felt it in the sharp intake of breath from the assembled nobles, in the way conversation stopped like someone had snuffed out every candle at once. "I carry the Duke's true heir." Arden had spent 3 years as Duchess of Thornmere. 3 years learning the intricate dance of court politics, the unspoken rules, the careful balance of power. She'd been raised for this, daughter of a lesser house, married up through strategic alliance. She knew how to smile at the right moments, how to deflect insults with grace, how to manage a household of 200 staff without appearing to manage anything at all. None of that prepared her for this. Edmund stirred in her arms, making the small snuffling sounds newborns make. He had Tristan's nose. She'd noticed it the day he was born, had pointed it out to her husband with something like hope in her voice. Tristan had smiled, briefly, then left to attend to urgent matters. That was 2 weeks ago. He'd barely visited since. Now she understood why. A knock at the door. Arden didn't turn. "Come in, Margaret." Her lady-in-waiting entered, carrying a tray of tea that Arden wouldn't drink. Margaret was 60, gray-haired, sharp-eyed. She'd served Arden's mother before her. "You should rest, my lady." "I've been resting for 3 weeks. Look where it got me." Margaret set down the tray with a soft clink. "The talk will settle. These things always do they?" Arden finally looked at her. "When a duke's mistress claims his legitimate heir is false, when she suggests the Duchess committed adultery, that settles?" Margaret's jaw tightened. "It's absurd. Everyone knows." "Everyone knows nothing." Arden crossed to the chair by the fireplace, sat carefully. Edmund was asleep now, his tiny fist curled against her collarbone. "That's the brilliance of it. Nyra didn't accuse me directly. She didn't say Edmund isn't Tristan's. She just implied it. Let people's imaginations do the rest. The Duke will handle it." "Would he?" Arden thought of Tristan's face in the grand hall, the way he'd gone pale, then red, then carefully blank. The way he'd excused himself without speaking to her. The way he'd sent a servant, to tell her he'd be sleeping in the East Wing. "The Duke," Arden said softly, "is sleeping in the East Wing." Margaret went still. In the fireplace, a log cracked and settled. He hasn't decided what he believes yet." Arden adjusted Edmund's blanket. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. "And until he does, She trailed off. What was she? Not disgraced, not yet. Not divorced. That would require proof she hadn't provided. Just suspended. Hanging in limbo while the court decided her fate. While Tristan decided her fate. "What will you do?" Margaret asked. Good question. Arden had spent the day in her chambers, accepting visits from exactly 3 people: Margaret, the wet nurse, and the physician who'd delivered Edmund. Everyone else had suddenly become very busy. Invitations to tea had dried up. The ladies who'd cooed over Edmund just yesterday now found reasons to be elsewhere. Even the servants moved differently around her. Quicker, quieter, eyes averted. She was already a ghost. "I'm going to think," Arden said, "and then I'm going to act." "My lady, leave me, please." Margaret hesitated, then curtsied and withdrew. The door clicked shut. Arden was alone with her son and the fire and the catastrophic wreckage of her life. She should be crying, she thought distantly. should be hysterical. That's what they'd expect, the wronged wife, the accused adulteress, breaking down in her chambers, begging Tristan to believe her, throwing herself on his mercy. Instead, she felt cold, clear, angry in a way that sharpened rather than clouded. Naira Vale had planned this. The timing was too perfect. 3 weeks after the birth, long enough for Arden to be weakened by childbirth, isolated in her chambers, long enough for Naira to plant seeds, to whisper in the right ears. And that announcement in the grand hall hadn't been spontaneous. Naira had been positioned perfectly, had waited for maximum audience. This was calculated, which meant Arden needed to be more calculated. She looked down at Edmund. He slept with the complete trust of the very young, unconcerned with accusations or politics, or the fact that his entire future hung in balance. "I won't let them take it from you," she whispered, "whatever I have to do." The next morning, Arden requested an audience with Tristan. The servant who took her message looked uncomfortable. "His Grace is occupied, my lady." "Then I'll wait." He said, "I'll wait in the blue drawing room. Tell him I'll be there until he finds time." It was a gamble. Tristan could leave her there all day, publicly humiliating her further, or he could come, if only to avoid the spectacle of his wife camped out like a petitioner. She waited 4 hours. When Tristan finally appeared, he looked exhausted. There were shadows under his eyes, and his cravat was slightly askew, unusual for a man who prided himself on appearance. "Arden." "Your Grace." She stood, curtsied, formal. They were performing for the servants who'd inevitably be listening at doors. He gestured for her to sit, took the chair across from her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Tristan was handsome, in the way of men born to power. Strong jaw, clear eyes, the kind of presence that filled a room. Arden had thought herself lucky once. He'd been kind during their courtship, attentive. The mistress was a known factor. Most dukes had them. It hadn't seemed important. Now she studied him and saw a man drowning. "Tristan," she said quietly, "look at me." He did finally. His eyes were bloodshot. "Did I ever give you reason to doubt me?" His throat worked. "No." "In 3 years of marriage, did I ever—" "No." Sharper now, almost angry. "No, you didn't, but Naira says otherwise." "Naira is—" He stopped, started again. "The physicians examined you. Before the wedding, you were a virgin." "Yes." Heat crept up her neck, but she held his gaze. "Your physicians confirmed it. Your mother insisted on it. I have the documentation." Documentation can be forged. There it was. The doubt, spoken aloud. Arden felt something crack in her chest, but kept her voice level. "So can medical records. So can birth dates. So can anything, if you want to disbelieve it badly enough." Tristan flinched. I don't want—" He stood abruptly, paced to the window. "You don't understand the position this puts me in." "Don't I?" "Naira is claiming—" "I know what she's claiming. I was there." Arden stood too, kept the chair between them. "What I don't understand is why you're giving her claims equal weight to 3 years of marriage." "She's pregnant." The words landed like a slap. Arden had suspected, of course. Naira's hand on her belly hadn't been subtle, but hearing it confirmed was different. "Congratulations," she said, and was pleased her voice didn't shake. "Don't." Tristan turned back to her. "Don't do that. This isn't— I didn't plan." "No, you just couldn't keep your cock in your pants long enough to—" She stopped, breathed. Losing her temper wouldn't help. "How far along?" 4 months. 4 months. So Naira had been pregnant when Edmund was born. Had been pregnant when she'd cooed over him in his cradle, when she'd congratulated Arden on producing an heir. Had been planning this. "And you believe the child is yours?" He looked away. "Yes. But not Edmund." "I didn't say that." "You're sleeping in the East Wing." "I need time to think." "You need time," Arden repeated. "Meanwhile, I'm confined to my chambers like a prisoner. Meanwhile, the entire court is whispering about my supposed adultery. Meanwhile, our son, your legitimate heir, is being called a bastard. But you need time." Tristan's hands clenched. "What do you want me to do? Naira says—" Naira claims. Naira implies. Arden moved around the chair closer to him. Have you noticed she never quite accuses me directly? She's too clever for that. She just plants doubt and lets it grow. Are you saying she's lying? I'm saying she's maneuvering, and you're letting her. If Edmund isn't mine, he is. Then everything changes. The succession, the alliances, He is yours. Tristan looked at her, really looked, and for a moment she thought he might believe her, might remember who she was, who they'd been together. Then his gaze slid away. I need proof, he said quietly. What proof? What could I possibly? The physicians, an independent examination, blood rituals if necessary. Blood rituals. The old magic, barely legal, widely distrusted, used only in the most extreme cases. You want to put our infant son through blood magic because your mistress told a convincing lie? It's not. He stopped. This isn't personal, Arden. Not personal. She laughed, sharp and bitter. My reputation destroyed, my child's legitimacy questioned, my marriage dissolved in everything but name. But it's not personal. You're not being fair. No, Arden agreed. I'm not. Fair would be you defending your wife. Fair would be you investigating Naira's claims before accepting them. Fair would be you remembering that I've never given you reason to doubt me while she stopped, carefully. While she has every reason to lie. What's that supposed to mean? Think, Tristan. Really think. What does Naira gain if Edmund is declared illegitimate? He said nothing. Her child becomes your heir, Arden continued. She rises from mistress to mother of the next duke. Her family's position becomes unassailable. She wins everything. She wouldn't she? You know her better than I do. You've known her for 7 years. Is she the kind of woman who'd accept second place? Tristan's jaw worked. He'd gone pale again. I'll arrange the examination, he said finally. Independent physicians. Tomorrow. It wasn't belief, but it wasn't complete doubt either. Arden would take it. Fine, she said. Examine Edmund. Test his blood. Do whatever you need to do. But Tristan? She waited until he looked at her. When you discover I've been telling the truth this whole time, when you realize you've humiliated and doubted your wife for nothing, ask yourself if we'll ever recover from this. She curtsied, formal and cold, and left before he could respond. The examination took place in the physician's tower, a circular room with north-facing windows and the smell of herbs. 3 physicians attended, one of Tristan's choosing, one of Arden's, and one appointed by the High Court. Edmund screamed through most of it. They measured him, weighed him, examined his features with magnifying lenses. They took samples of blood, hair, skin. The court physician even performed a simplified version of the blood ritual, mixing Edmund's blood with Tristan's and watching how they combined. Arden watched it all with her spine straight and her hands folded, letting no emotion show. When it was over, the lead physician, a gray-bearded man named Corvus, bowed to her. The child is legitimate, Your Grace. The blood confirms it, as does every physical characteristic. There is no question of paternity. Relief should have flooded through her. Instead, Arden just felt tired. Put it in writing, she said. Every detail. I want 3 copies. Of course, Your Grace. She reclaimed her screaming son from the wet nurse, held him close. It's over, she murmured. You're safe now. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. Because when she emerged from the physician's tower, Tristan was waiting in the corridor, and he didn't look relieved. He looked cornered. The physicians confirmed it, she said. Edmund is yours. You can stop doubting now. Arden, unless you plan to doubt the physicians too, maybe they're all part of my elaborate conspiracy. Maybe I've bribed the entire medical establishment. People are always saying something. She shifted Edmund to her other hip. What are you saying, Tristan? That's what matters. He looked at her helplessly. Naira is insistent. She says, I don't care what Naira says. The words came out louder than she'd intended. A passing servant jumped. Arden lowered her voice. The physicians confirmed Edmund's legitimacy. What more do you need? She's pregnant with my child too. So you've said. If I publicly side with you, it looks like I'm casting her aside. Like I'm choosing. You are choosing. That's the point. Arden stepped closer. You're the Duke. You have a legitimate wife and a legitimate heir. Naira is your mistress. Those aren't equal positions, no matter what she's convinced you of. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You're making it complicated because you feel guilty. She saw him flinch, press the advantage. You got your mistress pregnant while your wife was carrying your heir. You know it's shameful. So when she offers you a way out, a way to make me the villain instead of you, you're tempted to take it. That's not, isn't it? Tristan looked away. The court is divided. Half the nobles are calling for your exile. The other half want Naira removed. There are factions forming, Arden. This could tear the duchy apart. So that was it. Not concern for the truth, but for political stability. Arden felt the last ember of hope die. Then make a decision, she said coldly. Support your legitimate wife and heir, or side with your mistress and her accusations. But stop trying to play both sides. It's beneath you. She walked away before he could respond, Edmund's cries echoing off the stone walls. That night, alone in her chambers, Arden finally let herself think clearly. The examination had proven Edmund's legitimacy. But Naira hadn't withdrawn her claims. If anything, the woman had doubled down. Arden heard reports of her weeping in the rose garden, telling anyone who'd listen that the physicians must have been bribed or threatened. The court was choosing sides. That was the real danger. Not the truth of Edmund's parentage, but the political schism it was creating. Nobles who'd long resented Arden's lower birth were using this as an excuse to call for her removal. Others, those allied with her family, were defending her loudly enough to make enemies. Tristan was caught in the middle, paralyzed by indecision, which meant Arden needed to force a decision. She rang for Margaret. "I need you to do something for me," she said when her lady-in-waiting arrived, "and you're going to think I'm insane." Margaret sat. "Try me. I need you to find out everything you can about Naira's pregnancy, who examined her, when, what they found. I need documentation. The Duke's physicians. I need independent verification, someone outside Tristan's control." Arden paced the length of the room. "And I need you to look into something else. The timing." "Timing? Naira claims she's 4 months pregnant. Edmund is 3 weeks old. That means she conceived," Arden calculated quickly, "around the same time I did, maybe even the same week." Margaret frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not sure yet, but it's convenient, isn't it, that her pregnancy allows her to claim her child is the true heir just when mine becomes vulnerable to doubt. You think she planned this?" "I think Naira Vale doesn't do anything without a plan." Arden stopped pacing. "And I think if we look closely enough, we'll find the seams where her story doesn't quite fit together." Margaret stood. "I'll see what I can find. But, my lady, if you're wrong, I'm not. If you're wrong and you accuse her publicly, it will only make things worse. Then I'll need to be very sure before I accuse anyone of anything." Arden managed a smile. "Don't worry. I learned from the best. I won't move until I have proof." After Margaret left, Arden sat by the fire and began making notes. Everything she knew about Naira, everything that didn't quite add up. The timing was suspicious, yes, but more than that, Naira's confidence. The way she'd made her announcement in the Grand Hall, in front of maximum witnesses. The way she'd never directly accused Arden, always just implied. The way she'd positioned herself as the wronged party, the poor mistress forced to reveal an uncomfortable truth. It was theater, careful, calculated theater, which meant there was a script, a plan. And plans had vulnerabilities. Arden just needed to find them. She worked through the night, filling pages with observations, questions, connections. When dawn broke over the courtyard, she had the beginning of something. Not proof, not yet, but a direction. A knock at the door startled her, too early for Margaret. "Come in." A young page entered, looking nervous. "Message for you, Your Grace, from the High Court." Arden's stomach dropped. She took the sealed letter, broke the wax, read it once, then again. "No," she whispered. The page shifted uncomfortably. "Is there a reply, Your Grace?" "Get out!" He fled. Arden stood there with the letter shaking in her hands. The High Court had scheduled a formal lineage hearing 2 weeks from today to settle the matter of succession and legitimacy once and for all, which sounded official and fair, except that lineage hearings had a terrible track record for women. The burden of proof was on the accused. The judges were all men. And Naira would have 2 weeks to shore up her story, to bribe or threaten anyone who might contradict her. 2 weeks. Arden looked at Edmund asleep in his cradle. 2 weeks to save both their futures. She sat back down at her desk and kept writing. Margaret returned 3 days later with a leather folio that she set on Arden's desk like it might explode. "You're not going to like this," she said. Arden was nursing Edmund, something she'd insisted on doing herself despite the wet nurse's protests. She'd learned quickly that feeding time was one of the few moments no one dared interrupt her. "Show me." Margaret opened the folio. Inside were documents, physician's notes, dated and signed. Naira was examined by Dr. Halvern 6 weeks ago. He confirmed a pregnancy of approximately 14 weeks at that time. Halvern. Arden recognized the name. He's on Tristan's household staff. He is, and he's also... Margaret hesitated. He received a rather substantial bonus 2 months ago, 500 gold marks. No explanation in the ledgers. Arden's pulse quickened. That's unusual? Very. Household physicians are salaried. Bonuses of that size require the Duke's personal authorization, or someone with access to the Duke's accounts. Arden shifted Edmund to her shoulder, began patting his back. What else? Halvern's examination notes are minimal. Date of conception estimated, pregnancy confirmed, mother in good health. That's it. No measurements, no detailed observations. Margaret pulled out another document. Compare that to Dr. Corvus's notes on your pregnancy. 12 pages. Weekly measurements, health assessments, dietary recommendations. The difference was stark. Arden studied both documents, her mind racing. Halvern didn't examine her properly, or he was paid to write what he was told to write. It wasn't proof, not the kind that would hold up in a lineage hearing, but it was a thread, and Arden had learned that if you pulled threads carefully enough, entire tapestries unraveled. I need to see Halvern's financial records for the past year, she said, and I need a list of everyone Naira has spoken to privately in the last 2 months. Margaret's eyebrows rose. That's ambitious. How do you propose? The servants see everything. They hear everything. We just need to ask the right questions. Arden laid Edmund in his cradle, began pacing. Start with the chambermaids. They're invisible to people like Naira. She won't have guarded her tongue around them. And if they're loyal to Naira? Everyone's loyal to someone until they're not. Find out what they want. Better positions, extra pay, time off to visit family. We have resources. Use them. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're playing a dangerous game, my lady. Naira started this game. I'm just learning the rules." Arden turned back to her. 2 weeks, Margaret. That's all we have before the hearing. If we go in without ammunition, I lose everything. Edmund loses everything. And if you're caught investigating, then I'm already lost, so what difference does it make? She heard the edge in her own voice, tried to soften it. I need you to trust me. Margaret stood, collected the documents. I've trusted you since you were 16 years old and convinced your father to let you study politics instead of embroidery. I'm not stopping now. She paused at the door, but be careful. Cornered animals bite. After she left, Arden sat at her desk and began drafting a list, not just of people to investigate, but of allies to cultivate. The court was divided. Margaret had been right about that. But divisions could be exploited. She just needed to widen the cracks. She was 3 pages into her planning when another knock interrupted her. "What now?" she called, not looking up. The door opened. "Still charming as ever, I see." Arden's head snapped up. Standing in her doorway was Lady Celia Vross, resplendent in emerald silk and a smile sharp enough to cut. "Celia." Arden set down her pen. "I didn't know you were back at court. Arrived this morning, couldn't miss the excitement." Celia swept in without invitation, settled into the chair by the fire like she owned it. A lineage hearing, how positively medieval. Celia was dangerous. Arden had known that since their first meeting. A woman who wielded gossip like other people wielded swords, who'd survived 3 husbands and emerged wealthier each time. She was also, inconveniently, Naira's second cousin. I assume you're here to gloat, Arden said carefully. Gloat? Darling, no. Celia examined her nails. I'm here to offer you a deal. That got Arden's attention. What kind of deal? The kind where you publicly acknowledge that Edmund's paternity is questionable. You step aside gracefully, retire to one of Tristan's country estates. In exchange, you keep your title, your income, and your dignity, mostly. And Naira's child becomes heir. Naira's legitimate child, yes. Once you're gone, Tristan can marry her properly. Celia smiled. Everyone wins. Arden felt rage simmer in her chest, kept her voice level. Except me. And Edmund. Oh, Edmund will be taken care of. Good education. Comfortable life. He just won't be Duke. Is that really so terrible? You're asking me to declare my own son a bastard. I'm asking you to be practical. The hearing won't go your way, Arden. You must know that. Celia leaned forward. The judges are all men. They'll believe what they want to believe. And what they want is to avoid a succession crisis. If you fight this, you'll lose anyway, but you'll lose everything. No estate, no income, no dignity. They'll strip you bare. Is that what Naira told you to say? Celia laughed. Naira doesn't know I'm here. This is my own observation. I like you, Arden. You've got spirit. I'd hate to see you destroyed over pride. This isn't pride. It's the truth. The truth. Celia said it like a dirty word. The truth is whatever the High Court decides it is. You know that. You've been here long enough. She wasn't wrong. That was the infuriating part. Arden had watched enough trials to know that evidence mattered less than narrative, that justice bent to political convenience. But she'd also watched enough trials to know how to build a case. Thank you for the offer, Arden said. But no. Celia sighed. I told Naira you'd be stubborn. So she did send you. She suggested I might facilitate a resolution. But the approach was mine. Celia stood, smoothed her skirts. Last chance, darling. Take the deal. Salvage what you can. Get out. Suit yourself. Celia paused at the door. Just remember, when this goes badly, and it will, I tried to help. She swept out, leaving a faint trail of perfume. Arden sat very still for a long moment. Then she picked up her pen and added Celia's name to the list of people to investigate. If Naira was sending emissaries to negotiate, it meant she was worried. Good. Let her worry. The next morning, Arden did something she hadn't done since Edmund's birth. She left her chambers and walked the court. The reaction was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Nobles stared or looked away too quickly. A younger Duchess actually backed into a potted plant to avoid her. Arden smiled pleasantly at everyone and kept walking. She found Tristan in the war room, bent over maps with his military advisors. When she entered, the room went silent. Your Grace, she said. Might I have a word? Tristan looked up, clearly torn between dismissing her and maintaining appearances. Appearances won. Gentlemen, we'll continue this later. The advisors filed out, throwing curious glances over their shoulders. When the door closed, Tristan rounded on her. What are you doing? Walking. Is that forbidden now? You know what I mean. People are talking. People are already talking. I decided I'd rather they talk about me being defiant than cowering in my rooms. She moved to the map table, studied the deployment markers. Northern border still unstable? Arden? I'm still your wife, Tristan. Still the Duchess. Until the hearing rules otherwise, I have every right to walk these halls. She looked up at him. Unless you'd like to confine me formally, lock me in the tower, perhaps? His jaw clenched. Don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic. I'm establishing my position. I'm legitimate until proven otherwise. I won't act like a criminal waiting for sentencing. The hearing is in less than 2 weeks. If you just what? Disappear? Make it easier for everyone? She picked up one of the carved horses from the map, turned it over in her hands. Celia Vross came to see me yesterday. Tristan went very still. What did she want? To offer me a deal. Abdicate gracefully in exchange for a comfortable exile. Arden set the horse down. Which makes me wonder, is this hearing actually about finding the truth? Or is it just theater to legitimize a predetermined outcome? No one's predetermined anything. Then why is Nira's cousin negotiating my surrender? I didn't know she was... He stopped. Celia acts on her own initiative. I can't control her. Can you control Naira? Wrong question. Arden saw it immediately in the way Tristan's expression shuddered. Naira is the mother of my child. So am I. You know what I mean. I really don't. Arden moved closer, kept her voice low. Help me understand, Tristan. What hold does she have over you? Because 3 months ago, she was just your mistress. Inconvenient, but manageable. Now she's dictating terms, sending intermediaries, preparing to testify against your legitimate heir. What changed? He looked away. It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it. I can't. Can't or won't. Tristan's hands curled into fists. You don't understand the pressure. I understand perfectly. I understand that you'd rather sacrifice me than deal with your mistress. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. I understand that you're weak. He flinched like she'd slapped him. Get out. Gladly. Arden headed for the door, then paused. One more thing. The physician who examined Naira, Dr. Halvern. When did you approve his bonus payment? What? 500 gold marks 2 months ago. Rather generous for a routine examination, don't you think? Tristan's face went pale, then red. I don't know what you're talking about. No? Check your household accounts. I'll wait. She could see him calculating, weighing whether to call her bluff. Finally, I approve no such payment. Then someone's using your accounts without authorization. You should look into that. She opened the door. Before the hearing. Wouldn't want any, irregularities to surface. She left him standing there, and if her hands shook slightly as she walked away, no one was close enough to see. That afternoon, Margaret appeared with more documents and a grim expression. You were right about Halvern, she said, spreading papers across Arden's desk. 500 gold marks. Authorization forged with the Duke's seal. I found 3 more payments like it, all to people connected to Naira's household. How much total? 2,000 marks, distributed over 6 weeks. Arden whistled low. That's serious money. Who authorized it? The seal was the Duke's, but the handwriting doesn't match. I compared it to his actual correspondence. Margaret produced another document. Someone forged his authorization, multiple times. Who has access to the Duke's seal? His personal secretary, his chamberlain, and... Margaret hesitated. Say it. Naira Vale. She was in his private study regularly until your pregnancy. She could have made an impression, had a copy made. Arden sat back. This was bigger than she'd thought. Not just bribery, but fraud, forgery, using the Duke's authority to distribute money without his knowledge. Does Tristan know? Not unless you told him this morning. The household accounts are reviewed quarterly. The next review isn't for another month. So Naira has been systematically bribing people using Tristan's money and his seal, and no one noticed. Arden felt something cold settle in her stomach. What else has she done? That was the question, wasn't it? If Naira was bold enough to forge the Duke's seal, what else was she capable of? I need you to find something for me, Arden said slowly. Birth records. For Naira's family. Going back 3 generations. Margaret frowned. Why? Because people who plan this carefully don't start planning last month. I want to know if there's a history. Ambitious marriages, suspicious inheritances, convenient deaths. She stood, began pacing again. It helped her think. And I want to know about her pregnancy. Real verification, not Halvern's notes. Find me a physician who'll examine her properly. She'll never agree to that. She won't have a choice if the court orders it. Arden stopped pacing. That's it. That's the angle. What angle? The hearing is in 12 days. I can't prove Edmund is Tristan's. The blood ritual already did that, and people are still doubting. So I need to prove Naira is lying instead. She grabbed parchment, started writing. If I can show she's committed fraud, bribery, forgery, if I can cast doubt on everything she's said, then her claims about Edmund's legitimacy collapse too. Margaret looked doubtful. That's a lot to prove in 12 days. Then we'd better work fast. The next week was a blur of secret meetings and whispered conversations. Margaret worked her network of servants and minor nobles, gathering information, following money trails. Arden met with her family's allies, carefully rebuilding support without appearing desperate. And she studied Naira, watched from windows as the woman walked the gardens, always surrounded by admirers, listened to reports of her movements, her meetings, her carefully constructed image as the wronged mistress forced to speak difficult truths. Naira was good. Arden had to give her that. She never overplayed her hand, never appeared vindictive, just sad and reluctant and unfortunately certain. It was masterful. It was also starting to crack. 7 days before the hearing, one of the chambermaids came to Arden's rooms after midnight. The girl was terrified, kept glancing at the door like she expected assassins. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. "If Mistress Vale finds out—" "She won't." Arden poured the girl wine, waited for her to drink. "What's your name?" "Jenny, my lady." "Well, Jenny, you're safe here. Tell me what you know." It took another glass of wine, but eventually Jenny talked. About Naira's private meetings with Dr. Halvern. About documents she'd seen being burned in Naira's fireplace. About a conversation she'd overheard between Naira and Celia, something about timing the announcement perfectly and making sure the physicians cooperate. "What physicians?" Arden asked. "Not just Halvern." "I don't know, my lady. I just heard her say it." Jenny twisted her apron. "There's something else. The baby. What about it?" "Mistress Vale was ill last month. Badly ill. Dr. Halvern attended her for 3 days. But the sickness wasn't normal pregnancy sickness, my lady. There was blood." Arden went very still. "How much blood?" "Enough that the sheets had to be burned. And she screamed at night. I heard her." Jenny's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "My sister lost a baby last year. It sounded like that. A miscarriage. Or something close to it." "When exactly was this?" Arden asked. 5 weeks ago, maybe 6. 5 weeks ago, Naira had still been claiming a healthy pregnancy. Had still been planning her dramatic revelation. If she'd lost the baby? No. Arden forced herself to think clearly. A miscarriage didn't mean there'd never been a pregnancy, and it didn't prove anything about Edmund's legitimacy. But it was another thread, another inconsistency. "Thank you, Jenny," she said. "You've been very brave." "Will it help, my lady? What I told you?" "I don't know yet, but I won't forget it." She pressed coins into the girl's hand. "Keep your ears open, and be careful." After Jenny left, Arden sat in the dark and thought about blood and timing and lies. If Naira had lost her pregnancy, it changed everything. She'd be lying about being pregnant now. Which meant the entire foundation of her claims, that her child was the true heir, was false. But proving it would require examining Naira, and Naira would never submit to that voluntarily, unless Arden forced her hand. 3 days before the hearing, Arden requested a formal meeting with the High Court judges. It was an unusual move. Petitioners didn't typically meet with judges before trial, but her position as Duchess gave her certain privileges. To her surprise, they agreed. She dressed carefully that morning, not in mourning colors or submissive pastels, but in the deep blue of the ducal house. She wore her full jewels, including the sapphire necklace Tristan had given her on their wedding day. She looked like a duchess. She needed them to remember that. The 3 judges received her in a private chamber. Lord Emmet, stern and gray. Lord Petrus, younger, but no less severe. And Lord Kane, elderly and rumored to be fair. They sat behind a long table like executioners. "Your Grace," Emmet said, "this is highly irregular." "I'm aware. I appreciate your indulgence." Arden remained standing. "I wanted to request that the court order a medical examination of Naira Vale." Silence. Then Petra spoke. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that her pregnancy status is central to her claims. She's accused my son of being illegitimate while claiming her own child is the rightful heir. The court should verify both pregnancies equally." "Your son has already been examined," Kane said mildly. "Thoroughly. And proven legitimate." "Yes, but Naira's pregnancy has been verified only by a single physician on the Duke's household staff, a physician who received an unusual bonus shortly before providing his report." She let that hang in the air. I'm simply requesting the same standard of proof for both children. Emmett's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting Dr. Halvern falsified his examination? I'm suggesting that the court should be thorough. Surely you agree that such an important matter deserves independent verification? They exchanged glances. Arden could see the calculation. This was a reasonable request. Denying it would look biased. We'll take it under advisement, Emmett said finally. Thank you, my lord, said. Arden curtsied. One more thing. I'd like to submit additional evidence at the hearing. Financial records showing irregular payments from the ducal accounts. What kind of payments? Petrus asked. Payments made using the Duke's seal without his knowledge or authorization. Payments to individuals connected to this case. She pulled documents from her sleeve, set them on the table. I believe it speaks to a pattern of deception. Emmett picked up the papers, scanned them. His expression didn't change, but Arden saw his grip tighten. This is a serious accusation. It's serious evidence. I assume the court wants all relevant information before making a ruling? Another long silence. Then Kane spoke. We'll review your submission, and we'll consider the examination request. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Arden curtsied again and left before they could change their minds. She was halfway down the corridor when she heard rapid footsteps behind her. Arden! She turned. Tristan, slightly out of breath, looking furious. What did you just do? Submitted evidence to the court, as is my right. You accused Nira of forgery, mate. I accused someone of forgery. I didn't name her specifically. Arden kept walking. Though it's interesting that you assumed I meant her. He grabbed her arm, pulled her into an empty alcove. You're making this worse. If you just accept the settlement, what settlement? The one where I admit my son is a bastard and disappear quietly? She jerked her arm free. No. The court won't rule in your favor. They can't. The succession needs to be clear, and with Naira's pregnancy, Naira's not pregnant. Tristan froze. What? Or if she is, it's not as far along as she claims. I have a witness who says she bled heavily 5 weeks ago, enough to suggest a miscarriage. You can't prove that. I can if the court orders an examination, which they're considering. Arden stepped closer. Tell me something, Tristan. When did you last see Naira's belly? Actually see it, not just accept her word? He said nothing. You haven't, have you? Because she's been keeping you at arm's length, probably claiming modesty or some nonsense. Arden watched his face. What if I'm right? What if she lost the baby, or was never pregnant at all, and this entire thing is an elaborate fraud? Why would she? Because she's ambitious and clever, and she saw an opportunity. Arden lowered her voice. Think, Tristan. Really think. If she destroys me and Edmund, if her child becomes heir, her position is secured forever. She goes from mistress to power behind the throne. She wouldn't she? She could see doubt creeping into his expression. Not certainty, not yet, but doubt. It was a start. The hearing is in 3 days, she said quietly. You need to decide who you believe. Me, your wife of 3 years who's never lied to you, or Naira, who's been manipulating you from the beginning. She left him standing there, and this time he didn't follow. The night before the hearing, Arden couldn't sleep. She walked the halls of her chambers, Edmund sleeping peacefully in his cradle, oblivious to the fact that tomorrow would determine his entire future. Everything was ready. She had her evidence, her witnesses, her arguments prepared. Margaret had done incredible work, uncovering thread after thread of Naira's deceptions. The judges had agreed to hear the forgery evidence. They'd even, reluctantly, ordered Nira to submit to a medical examination, though it wouldn't happen until after the hearing began. It should have been enough, but Arden couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something. Some piece that would make everything else make sense. She was standing by the window, watching the moon over the courtyard, when she saw movement below. A cloaked figure crossing quickly toward the servants' entrance. Probably nothing. Servants moved at all hours. But something made her watch. Made her notice when a second figure joined the first in the shadows. Made her recognize, even at this distance, the particular way Naira moved. Arden grabbed her own cloak and moved. She knew the servants' passages better than most nobles, had made a point of learning them when she first became Duchess. She reached the lower level just in time to see Naira slip into a storage room, followed by a man Arden didn't recognize. She pressed herself against the wall, listening. Can't wait any longer. Naira's voice, sharp with stress. The examination is tomorrow morning. I told you the padding will hold. The man's voice. They're not going to strip you naked. What if they do? What if someone gets suspicious? Then you deflect. Claim modesty. You've done it before. Padding. Arden's breath caught. Naira wasn't pregnant, had never been pregnant or had lost it early and been faking ever since. The entire thing was theater. The Duchess knows, Naira said. Somehow she knows. She's been asking about blood, about the sickness. How could she know? We were careful. That bitch is smarter than I gave her credit for. Sound of pacing. If this falls apart, it won't. You go to the examination, you play the wounded party, They ordered an internal examination. Silence. Then, can you refuse? On what grounds? It'll make me look guilty. Then we move to the contingency plan. What contingency? The child. If you can't prove your pregnancy, cast more doubt on hers. We have the witnesses lined up, the testimony prepared. Make them question everything about that night 9 months ago. Her movements, her visitors, anything that could suggest Arden had heard enough. She stepped into the doorway. Suggest what exactly? Naira spun, face going white. The man, Arden recognized him now as one of Naira's distant relatives, reached for something in his belt. I wouldn't, Arden said calmly. Guards are right outside. One scream and you're both arrested. Naira recovered quickly, smoothing her expression into something almost regretful. Arden, this isn't what it looks like. No? It looks like you've been faking a pregnancy and planning to commit perjury. What does it actually look like? You're overreacting. I heard everything. The padding, the witnesses you've lined up, the contingency plan. Arden stepped into the room fully. It's over, Naira. Tomorrow, the court will examine you. They'll find out you're not pregnant, and then I'm going to tell them everything else, the forgeries, the bribes, all of it. Naira's mask finally cracked. You smug bitch. You think you've won? I think you've lost. I still have Tristan. I still have half the court convinced your brat is illegitimate. Even if I'm not pregnant anymore, even if they find the padding, I can claim I lost the baby from stress, from the Duchess's attacks. They'll sympathize with me. Will they? When I show them the evidence of fraud? When I prove you've been lying from the beginning? Your evidence doesn't matter, Naira's voice rose. You don't understand how this works. The court doesn't want truth. They want stability. They want a clear succession. And you're from a minor house, barely noble, married up through luck. I'm connected to half the families there. They'll choose me over you even if they know I'm lying. The words hit harder than Arden expected, because they might be true. Maybe, she said, but I'm going to make them regret it. She turned to leave, and that's when Naira's companion lunged. He was faster than he looked. Arden felt hands around her throat, felt herself slammed against the wall. She tried to scream but couldn't get air, darkness creeping into her vision. Then the pressure released. She collapsed, gasping, as guards poured into the room. Someone must have heard the scuffle. Arrest them, she croaked. Both of them. On what charge? Naira demanded, even as guards grabbed her arms. Arden straightened slowly, rubbing her throat. Assault on a duchess. That's treason. She looked at the guards. And have Dr. Corvus examine Mistress Vale immediately. I want documentation of her condition before tomorrow's hearing. Naira started screaming then, cursing and fighting. It took 3 guards to drag her away. Arden stood in the empty storage room, still shaking. She'd gotten what she needed. Proof. Witnesses. Naira's own confession overheard by guards. But Naira's words echoed in her head. They'll choose me over you even if they know I'm lying. Tomorrow would tell if that was true. The hearing chamber filled before dawn. Arden arrived early, dressed in the same ducal blue she'd worn to meet the judges, Edmund bundled in her arms because she refused to leave him with nurses. Not today. Not when everything hung in balance. The room was circular, tiered seats rising toward a domed ceiling painted with scenes of justice and judgment. Ironic, that. The 3 judges sat elevated at the front, and below them, 2 tables, one for Arden, one for the opposition. Except Naira wasn't sitting at hers. Her chair remained empty, guards posted at the doors. Tristan entered looking like he hadn't slept. Their eyes met across the chamber and he looked away first. That told her everything about where he stood. The gallery filled with nobles, all pretending this was just another court proceeding while practically salivating for scandal. Arden recognized most of them, allies, enemies, the perpetually undecided. Celia Vross sat in the third row wearing black like she was attending a funeral. Maybe she was. Lord Emmett struck his gavel. The sound echoed like a gunshot. This hearing is convened to address questions of lineage and legitimacy regarding the ducal succession. The petitioner, Duchess Arden Hale, stands accused of— He paused, clearly uncomfortable with the phrasing. Of bearing a child of uncertain paternity. The accuser, Mistress Nyra Vale, is currently detained pending examination of her own claims. Murmurs rippled through the gallery, so the arrest was public knowledge now. Good. However, Emmett continued, raising his voice, Mistress Vale's representative will present her case in her absence. A man stood from Nyra's table, Lord Castor Vrell, sharp-featured and sharper-minded, one of the duchy's best legal advocates. Of course Nyra had retained him, probably with Tristan's money. Your Honors, Vrell began smoothly, my client's current situation does not diminish the validity of her claims. The question before this court is simple. Is Edmund Hale the legitimate son of Duke Tristan Hale? My client has presented evidence suggesting otherwise. What evidence? Arden spoke before she could stop herself. Emmett's gavel came down again. Duchess, you'll have your turn to speak. I'm just curious what evidence exists beyond slander and lies. Duchess! Emmett's tone hardened. Another outburst, and I'll have you removed. Arden bit down on her response, felt Edmund shift against her chest. His small weight centered her. This wasn't about winning arguments with Vrell. This was about dismantling Nyra's entire construction. Vrell was still talking, spinning a narrative about suspicious timing, about the Duchess's seclusion during early pregnancy, about witnesses who claimed to see her in compromising situations. It was all vague, all suggestive, all impossible to directly refute because none of it was specific. Furthermore, Vrell said, we have testimony from multiple sources that the Duchess exhibited unusual behavior during her pregnancy. Secretive meetings, unexplained absences. I had morning sickness, Arden called out. Is that now evidence of adultery? The gavel? Duchess. My apologies, Your Honor. I'm just fascinated by this creative fiction. Emmett looked ready to follow through on his threat. Lord Kane leaned forward, his elderly face thoughtful. Lord Vrell, you speak of witnesses and testimony, but we've seen no actual evidence. No dates, no names, no specifics. Do you have anything concrete? Vrell's smile didn't waver. The witnesses are prepared to testify, my lord. However, given the sensitive nature of their positions, they've requested anonymity. How convenient, Arden muttered. I heard that, Emmett said. You were meant to. Kane held up a hand before Emmett could respond. Anonymous testimony is highly irregular. In matters of succession, we require verifiable evidence, and we have it, my lord. Vrell produced a document, a sworn statement from a household physician noting irregularities in the Duchess's condition during her 6th month of pregnancy. Arden's stomach dropped. She hadn't known about this. What irregularities? Beatrice asked, speaking for the first time. The physician noted that the Duchess's measurements were inconsistent with a 6-month pregnancy. Either the conception date was wrong, or I'm a human woman and not a mathematical formula? Arden stood, ignoring Emmett's warning look. Pregnancies vary. Any actual physician knows this. Who wrote this statement? As I said, they've requested anonymity. Right. So we're supposed to overturn a legitimate succession based on an unsigned document from an unnamed physician citing vague irregularities? She turned to the judges. This is absurd. If there's an accuser, I have the right to face them. The Duchess makes a fair point, Kane said. Lord Vrell, can you produce this physician? Vrell hesitated, just for a second, but Arden saw it. The physician is currently unavailable. How unavailable? Beatrice asked. Traveling abroad, but the statement is notarized. By whom? Arden demanded. Another hesitation. The notary's seal is on the document. Let me see it. Emmett looked like he wanted to refuse, but Kane nodded. A clerk brought the document to Arden's table. She scanned it quickly. And there, the notary's seal was slightly smudged, the wax a different color than standard court seals. "This is fake," she said flatly. "That's a serious accusation. And I can prove it." She held up the document. "The seal is wrong. Court notaries use red wax. This is burgundy. And the stamp is off-center, like someone pressed it without proper equipment." She looked at the judges. "This document was forged, probably in the last 48 hours. The gallery erupted. Vrel's face remained smooth, but Arden saw color rise in his neck. "The Duchess is grasping at straws," he said. "Perhaps the notary used different wax, or the seal shifted. Or perhaps your client is a fraud and you're complicit." Arden set the document down. "I'd like to submit my own evidence now." Emmett looked at Kane, who nodded slowly. "Proceed." Margaret appeared from the gallery. Arden had positioned her there deliberately, carrying the leather folio. She set it on Arden's table and retreated. Arden opened it, pulling out documents one by one. Financial records showing unauthorized payments from the Duke's accounts. 2,000 gold marks distributed over 6 weeks to individuals connected to Naira Vale's household. She laid out the ledgers. Payment authorizations bearing the Duke's seal, except the Duke never approved them. The handwriting analysis proves forgery. She set down the comparative documents. A statement from a chambermaid who overheard Naira Vale discussing how to time the announcement and ensure physician cooperation. Another statement from a servant who witnessed Naira burning documents in her fireplace 3 weeks ago. More papers. And finally, a medical report from Dr. Corvus conducted last night after Naira Vale was detained. The examination revealed, she paused for effect, that Mistress Vale is not currently pregnant. Furthermore, evidence suggests she may never have been pregnant or lost the pregnancy weeks ago and has been using padding to maintain the illusion. The gallery exploded. Even Emmett's gavel couldn't quiet them. Vrel had gone pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "That examination was conducted under duress," he started. "It was conducted under court order," Arden corrected. "Signed by all 3 judges yesterday. Would you like me to produce that document too, or can we trust that one's seal?" Kane was reading through the financial records, his expression growing darker. Petrus had the medical report. Emmett was trying to restore order, failing badly. Tristan sat in the front row of the gallery, looking like he might be sick. Finally, Emmett got the room quiet enough to speak. "These are serious allegations." "They're documented facts," Arden said. "Naira Vale orchestrated a fraud. She forged the Duke's seal, bribed officials, fabricated a pregnancy, and attempted to destroy the legitimate succession, all to position herself as mother to the heir." She picked up the last document. "And when I discovered her plot, she had her associate attack me. Guards witnessed it. I have the bruises on my throat to prove it." She pulled down her collar slightly, revealing the finger-shaped marks. She'd considered covering them with cosmetics, then decided the visual evidence was worth more than vanity. The judges conferred in whispers. Vrel looked like he was calculating escape routes. The gallery buzzed with speculation. "Your Honors," Vrel said, recovering slightly, "even if we accept these accusations against my client, and I'm not conceding their validity, they don't prove the Duchess's son is legitimate. The question of paternity remains." "The blood ritual confirmed it," Arden shot back. "Blood rituals can be manipulated." "By whom?" "The physicians examined Edmund in your presence. You saw the results yourself." Nevertheless, nothing. Arden felt her control slipping, forced herself to breathe. "You have no evidence. No real evidence. Just insinuations and anonymous accusations and forged documents. Meanwhile, I have medical confirmation, blood verification, and 3 years of faithful marriage. What exactly is your case based on?" Vrel opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time, he had no response. Kane set down the financial records. "I've seen enough. The evidence against Mistress Vale is substantial. The evidence against the Duchess is—" He glanced at Vrel. "Non-existent." "Agreed," Petrus said. Emmett looked less certain. "The court must be thorough. Perhaps we should hear from the Duke himself." All eyes turned to Tristan. He stood slowly, looking like a man walking to his execution. "Your Grace," Emmett said, "you've heard the evidence presented. Do you have anything to add?" Tristan's throat worked. He looked at Arden, and she saw everything in his face: guilt, shame, fear, Confusion? He'd trusted Naira, had believed her, at least partially, had let doubt poison what should have been joy at his son's birth. He stopped, started again. I was wrong. The gallery went silent. I allowed myself to be manipulated. I should have trusted my wife, should have investigated Naira's claims before giving them credence. He turned fully to Arden. I'm sorry. That doesn't fix anything, I know, but I'm sorry. It should have felt like victory. Instead, Arden just felt tired. Edmund is my son, Tristan continued, addressing the judges now. The legitimate heir. The blood ritual confirmed it, and I was a fool to ever doubt. He paused. As for Naira Vale, if she's done what the Duchess claims, she should face full consequences. Emmett nodded slowly. Very well. This court finds— Wait! The voice came from the gallery. Celia Vross stood, and she wasn't alone. Behind her, a dozen nobles rose as well. All of them connected to Naira's family, Arden realized. This proceeding is irregular, Celia said. The Duchess has produced evidence, yes, but it's all come to light very suddenly. Conveniently. One might say suspiciously. What are you suggesting? Kane asked. I'm suggesting that the Duchess had means and opportunity to fabricate this evidence herself. She's desperate to save her position. Who's to say she didn't forge those financial records? Bribe those servants to testify? Arden felt ice in her veins. Of course they wouldn't just accept defeat. The handwriting analysis, she started. Can be faked, Celia interrupted. The medical examination was conducted while Mistress Vale was under arrest, traumatized. Who's to say what Dr. Corvus actually found versus what he was pressured to report? Are you accusing Dr. Corvus of lying under oath? Emmett asked. I'm saying we should be thorough. As you said yourself, my lord, the court must be thorough. Celia smiled. I move that we conduct our own investigation into these allegations before ruling, give both sides equal scrutiny. The nobles behind her murmured agreement. Arden saw the play immediately. Delay, cast doubt, turn her evidence into just another set of accusations. Make it, he said, she said, until nobody knew what to believe. How long an investigation? Petrus asked. A month? Perhaps 2. These are serious matters. No! Arden's voice cut through the room. Absolutely not. Duchess? Emmett began. You want to investigate me? Fine. Do it now. Today. I'll submit to any examination you want. Question my servants, audit my accounts, verify every piece of evidence I've presented. She pointed at Celia. But if you delay this ruling, if you drag this out for months, you're not serving justice, you're serving politics. The Duchess is being dramatic, Celia started. The Duchess is being honest. Arden turned to the judges. Every day this remains unresolved, my son's legitimacy is in question. Every day the succession is uncertain. Every day people choose sides and the duchy becomes more divided. She took a breath. You have everything you need to make a ruling. The only question is whether you have the courage to make it. Dangerous words, challenging the judges directly. But Arden was past caution. Emmett's face darkened. Duchess, you overstep. Do I? Or am I the only one willing to name what's happening here? She looked at Celia, at the nobles standing with her. This isn't about truth or evidence anymore. It's about power, about which families control the succession. And you're all so busy maneuvering that you've forgotten there's a real child involved, a real heir. Edmund chose that moment to cry, a thin, demanding wail. Arden shifted him, began rocking automatically. He's 3 weeks old, she said quietly. He didn't ask for any of this, didn't ask to be born into a political nightmare. But here he is. And you're all deciding whether he gets to keep his birthright or spend his life as a bastard. Her voice hardened. So make your decision. Rule based on the evidence or rule based on politics. But make it now, because I'm done begging. Silence. Even Edmund had quieted, as if sensing the weight of the moment. Kane spoke first. I vote to rule now. The evidence is clear. Petrus nodded. Agreed. Further delay serves no purpose. Emmett looked at the nobles, at Celia's expectant face, then at the documents spread across the tables. Finally, he sighed. Very well. This court finds that Edmund Hale is the legitimate son of Duke Tristan Hale and rightful heir to the duchy. He raised his voice over the immediate reaction. Furthermore, we find that Naira Vale did knowingly and deliberately fabricate evidence, forge official documents, and attempt to defraud this court. She is stripped of all protections and privileges and remanded for criminal prosecution. The gallery erupted. Nobles were shouting, some in triumph, some in protest. Celia's face had gone white with rage. Vrel was gathering his documents with hands that shook slightly, but Arden barely heard any of it. She stood there, Edmund in her arms, and let the reality sink in. She'd won. Edmund was safe. Tristan approached her table, stopped a few feet away. Arden, not now. Please, I need to. I said not now. She looked at him fully. You doubted me. You let your mistress accuse me of adultery, let her question our son's legitimacy, and you did nothing, said nothing. You want forgiveness? You'll have to earn it. He flinched but nodded. I understand. Do you? Because I'm not sure you do. She adjusted Edmund's blanket. You can acknowledge him publicly. Make it clear to everyone that he's your heir. That's a start. Of course, whatever you need. What I need is for you to grow a spine, but we'll work with what we have. She brushed past him, heading for the exit. Margaret fell in beside her, and guards cleared a path through the crowd. They were almost to the door when someone grabbed Arden's arm. She spun, ready to strike, and found herself facing a young woman in servant's clothes. Not Jenny, someone else. The woman's eyes were wide, terrified. My lady, please, you have to listen. Let go of me. It's about Mistress Vale. She's not. The woman glanced around frantically. She's not in her cell anymore. Arden went cold. What? She escaped an hour ago. The guards don't know how, but she's gone, and she left a message. The woman pressed something into Arden's hand, a folded piece of paper. She told me to give you this. Said if I didn't, she'd. Her voice broke. Please, my lady. I have children. Arden took the paper, waved the woman away. Her hands were steady as she unfolded it, but her heart hammered. The message was brief, written in Naira's elegant script. You've won nothing. Destroying me means destroying yourself. I made sure of that. Check your son's cradle tonight. And remember, I always plan ahead. Arden's vision tunneled. Edmund. The message mentioned Edmund. She shoved the paper at Margaret. Get Tristan. Get guards. Now. She was already running, pushing through the crowd. Edmund clutched tight against her chest. Margaret's voice behind her. My lady, wait. But Arden was sprinting now, through corridors, upstairs, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Naira had escaped, had planned for this, had planned something involving Edmund's cradle, and if Arden hadn't won, if the hearing had gone differently, she burst into her chambers. The wet nurse looked up, startled. Where's the cradle? Edmund's cradle? In the nursery, my lady, where it always... Arden was moving again. Into the nursery, where afternoon light streamed through windows, and Edmund's carved wooden cradle sat peaceful and innocent. She set Edmund down carefully on a cushioned bench, then approached the cradle like it might bite. At first she saw nothing, just the small mattress, the blankets, the... Wait, she lifted the mattress. Underneath, pressed against the wooden base, was a small glass vial, clear liquid inside, sealed with wax. Arden's breath stopped. Don't touch it! Tristan was in the doorway, flanked by guards. He crossed to her quickly, grabbed her wrist before she could pick up the vial. It could be anything, he said. Poison, acid, we need the physicians. Dr. Corvus arrived within minutes, along with 2 guards who'd served in the war and knew about hazardous materials. They removed the vial carefully, using tools and cloth to avoid direct contact. Corvus examined it in the light, his face grave. Moonbane extract, he said finally. Highly toxic, especially to infants. If he'd lain on this mattress, the heat of his body would have caused the wax to soften. The vial would break. The liquid would seep through. He stopped. He wouldn't have lasted the night. Arden's knees gave out. She would have fallen if Tristan hadn't caught her, lowered her to a chair. Edmund was crying again. She'd left him on the bench, and someone brought him to her. She held him, felt his solid warmth, his living heat, and couldn't stop shaking. Naira had planned to murder him. If Arden had lost the hearing, if Edmund had been declared illegitimate, nobody would have questioned his death too closely. Just a tragedy. These things happen with infants, and even now, with Arden's victory, Naira had left this as a parting gift. A message. I could have killed him any time. I still might. We'll find her, Tristan was saying. I'll send every guard, She's gone by now. Arden's voice sounded hollow. She planned this. The escape, the message, all of it. She knew she might lose. Then we'll hunt her to the ends of the earth if necessary. And in the meantime, Arden looked up at him. How many more vials has she hidden? How many more servants has she compromised? How many more ways has she found to threaten my son? Tristan had no answer. Corvus cleared his throat. My lady, I recommend a full search of your chambers. Every room, every piece of furniture. And perhaps, he hesitated, perhaps the young lord should sleep elsewhere until we're certain it's safe. No. The word came out sharp. I'm not leaving these rooms, and I'm not letting Edmund out of my sight. Arden, Tristan started. She wants me afraid. Wants me scattered, paranoid, looking over my shoulder. Arden stood, Edmund in her arms. I won't give her that. We search the rooms, we post guards, we take every precaution, but we don't run. Margaret appeared in the doorway. My lady, the High Court has issued an arrest warrant for Naira Vale. Treason, attempted murder, fraud. She paused. They've also ordered a full investigation into everyone connected to her. Family, servants, associates. Good, Arden said. But it's not enough. What do you mean? Arden looked at the vial, still held carefully in the physician's cloth, at the cradle where her son should have died, at the windows overlooking the duchy Naira had tried to steal. I mean, I'm done playing defense. She turned to Tristan. Naira said destroying her means destroying myself. That she made sure of it. What did she mean? I don't think, Tristan. What hold does she still have? What information? What leverage? His face shifted through several emotions before settling on resignation. The ledgers. What ledgers? Financial records. From before we married. Some of my father's less legal transactions. Trade agreements that violated treaties, bribes to foreign officials. If they came to light, it would disgrace the entire house. And Naira has copies. She claimed she did. Said if I ever cut her off completely, she'd release them. Arden absorbed this. So she's been blackmailing you. Not blackmailing, just ensuring her position. That's literally what blackmail is. Arden paced, thinking. Where would she keep the copies? I don't know. She never told me. But she would have told someone. Someone she trusted to release them if anything happened to her. Arden stopped. Celia. You can't know that. Celia's her cousin, her closest ally. And she was very confident in that hearing, even when Naira wasn't there. Arden looked at Margaret. Get me everything we have on Celia Vross, properties, accounts, known associates, and find out where she went after the hearing. Margaret nodded and left. Tristan was shaking his head. If you go after Celia, you'll make an enemy of half the court. I don't care. Arden's voice was flat. Naira tried to kill my son. She's still out there planning who knows what, with leverage over this entire house. So I'm going to find that leverage, destroy it, and eliminate any chance she has of hurting us again. You can't. I can, and I will. She looked at him directly. You let this happen, Tristan. You enabled it by being weak, by letting Naira manipulate you, by not dealing with her years ago. So now I'm dealing with it. You can help or you can stay out of my way, but either way, it's happening. He stared at her like seeing her for the first time. Maybe he was. What do you need? He asked finally. Authority, official authority to investigate Celia and anyone else connected to Naira, and access to the Duchy's intelligence network. We don't have an intelligence. Yes, you do. You just don't use it properly. Arden handed Edmund to the wet nurse, began issuing orders to the guards. I want surveillance on Celia Vross starting immediately. I want her correspondence intercepted, her movements tracked. I want to know everyone she talks to, everywhere she goes. My lady, that's quite invasive. So is murdering infants, she turned back to Tristan. Are you going to authorize this or not? He looked at Edmund, at the vial Corvus was carefully storing for evidence, at Arden's bruised throat. Authorized, he said quietly. Over the next 4 hours, Arden's chambers transformed into a command center. Margaret returned with files on Celia, 3 marriages, 5 properties, connections to merchant houses across 3 kingdoms. Maps went up on the walls. Servants came and went with reports. Guards coordinated surveillance rotations, and slowly a picture emerged. Celia had visited Naira's cell the night before the hearing, before Naira's escape. She'd left carrying a small trunk, and this morning she'd sent a courier to her estate outside the capital, priority delivery. The documents, Arden said, pointing at the map. She has them at the estate. Has to. It's the only property far enough from court scrutiny. Or Naira has them, Tristan countered. Wherever she's hiding. No. Naira wouldn't carry that kind of leverage while running. Too risky. She'd leave it with someone she trusts. Someone with resources and distance. Arden traced the road to Celia's estate. 3 hours' ride. We could be there by midnight. We? Tristan looked alarmed. You don't have to come. I'm not letting you ride out there alone. Then come. Or send guards. I don't care. But I'm going tonight, before Celia realizes we're on to her. Tristan ran his hands through his hair. This is insane. This is necessary. In the end, they rode out with 20 guards just after sunset. Arden had wanted to leave immediately, but Tristan insisted on proper preparation. So they spent an hour gathering supplies, weapons, planning the approach. Edmund stayed behind with Margaret and a full security detail. Arden hated leaving him, but taking an infant on a midnight raid was worse. If anything happens, she'd started. Nothing will happen, Margaret said firmly. I'll guard him with my life. I know you will. The ride was cold and dark. Arden kept her horse close to Tristan's, both of them surrounded by guards. They didn't speak much. What was there to say? But somewhere around the halfway point, he cleared his throat. I really am sorry, he said quietly, for all of it. I know. I don't expect you to forgive me. Good, because I haven't yet. She glanced at him. But I might, eventually, if you prove you've learned something from this. What would that look like? Standing up for your family, making hard choices, not being swayed by pretty faces and empty promises. She paused. Being the Duke you're supposed to be instead of the one you want to be. He absorbed that. Fair enough. They rode in silence after that. Celia's estate appeared over a hill, a sprawling manor house, lights burning in several windows despite the late hour. Either she was awake, or she'd left servants on duty. Tristan called the company to a halt. Approach? Arden studied the layout. Gardens on 3 sides, a single access road. Guards would be stationed at the front entrance, but the side gardens. Split the group, she said. Half come with us to the front. Half circle around to cover the gardens in case she runs. It was a solid plan. Tristan relayed the orders and guards peeled off into the darkness. Then they rode up to the main entrance and knocked like they had every right to be there. A sleepy footman answered, took one look at the Duke and Duchess with 20 armed guards, and went pale. Is Lady Vross at home? Arden asked pleasantly. She's... We'll announce ourselves. Arden pushed past him into the entrance hall. Celia appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a robe and holding a candelabra. She descended slowly, her face a mask of polite confusion. Your Graces, what an unexpected visit. I'm sure. Arden looked around the hall. Expensive art, imported rugs, a coat of arms that wasn't even Celia's family's original one. We need to have a conversation. At this hour? Now works for me. Celia's smile didn't waver. Of course. Perhaps in the drawing room. I'll have tea brought. No tea, just answers. Arden moved closer. Where are the ledgers? I don't know what you mean. Naira's insurance, the documents she was using to blackmail the Duke. You have them. Give them to me. I'm afraid you're mistaken. Guards, Tristan said quietly. Search the house. Celia's composure finally cracked. You can't. This is my property. And this is a ducal order. Tristan handed her an official document, sealed and signed. We have authority to search for stolen materials relevant to an ongoing treason investigation. This is harassment. This is justice. Arden watched guards fan out through the house. You helped Naira escape. You've been protecting her throughout this whole ordeal. And you're holding leverage over the duchy. That ends tonight." Celia's eyes went hard. "You have no proof I've done anything. We have testimony placing you at Naira's cell the night of her escape. We have records of your courier this morning. We have speculation, insinuation, just like what you accused Naira of." Celia descended the last few stairs. "You're making a mistake, Duchess. I have friends, powerful friends. If you antagonize them over this, my lady," a guard appeared from a side hallway. "We found something." He was carrying a metal strongbox, locked and sealed. Celia's face went white. "That's private property. Open it," Arden ordered. The guard broke the lock with the pommel of his sword. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were ledgers, dozens of them. Tristan reached in, pulled one out, flipped through it. His expression grew darker with each page. "These are—" He looked at Celia. "Some of these transactions are from my grandfather's time. How did Naira—" "She collected them over years," Celia said flatly. "Every indiscretion, every questionable deal, every secret the ducal house wanted buried. She was thorough. And you helped her. I kept them safe. There's a difference." Arden took the ledger from Tristan, scanned the entries. Bribes, illegal trades, treaty violations, everything that could destroy the duchy's reputation and alliances. "We're taking these," she said. "Of course you are. You've already won." Celia's voice dripped bitterness. "You destroyed Naira. You'll destroy me next, all to protect your position. I'm protecting my son. By ruining everyone who opposed you, that's not protection, that's vengeance. Maybe it's both." They loaded the strongbox onto a horse. Arden was ready to leave when one of the garden guards came running. "My lady, we found something else. Someone else." Arden's heart jumped. "Naira?" "No, my lady, but you need to see this." They followed him to the east garden, where another group of guards surrounded a small groundskeeper's cottage. Inside, bound to a chair and gagged, was Dr. Halvern. The physician looked terrified. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut. He'd clearly been beaten. Arden removed his gag. "What happened?" I tried to tell the truth. After the hearing, I went to the High Court to confess that Naira paid me to falsify her pregnancy examination, and she—" He looked at Celia. "She had me taken, said I was a liability." Celia said nothing, but her jaw was tight. "Where's Naira now?" Tristan demanded. "I don't know. She was here 2 days ago, but she left. Said something about having a backup plan, about going somewhere the duchy couldn't reach her." "Where?" "I don't know," Halvern's voice broke. "Please, I've told you everything. She didn't trust me with details. She mentioned ships and a foreign port." Arden exchanged glances with Tristan. If Naira had fled the kingdom entirely— "We'll find her," Tristan said grimly, "even if we have to search every port on the coast." But Arden was thinking about the vial in Edmund's cradle, about Naira's message. "I always plan ahead." If this was her backup plan, fleeing the kingdom with leverage intact, what else had she set in motion? They brought Halvern and Celia back to the capital under guard. By the time they arrived, dawn was breaking over the city walls. Arden was exhausted, filthy, and running on pure adrenaline. Margaret met them at the gate, her face grim. "My lady, thank the—" She stopped. "Edmund's fine, but you need to see something." They followed her to the court where a crowd had gathered in the main square. Someone had posted notices overnight, dozens of them, plastered on walls and doors. Arden read the nearest one and felt ice flood her veins. "Citizens of Thornmere, your Duchess has hidden the truth. The child she claims as heir is false, born of adultery. The proof lies in documents she destroyed, witnesses she silenced. Demand justice. Demand the truth." And at the bottom, a symbol, Naira's family crest. "She's starting a revolt," Margaret said quietly. "Even in exile, she's trying to destroy you." Arden looked at the crowd, at the suspicion and anger on their faces. Some believed the notices. Others weren't sure what to believe. This was Naira's final play. If she couldn't win through court, she'd win through public opinion. Turn the people against Arden, make the duchy ungovernable, force a crisis that would destabilize everything. "How many notices?" she asked. Hundreds. All over the capital. And there are reports of them appearing in other cities too. She must have had this network prepared for months. Of course she had. Nira always planned ahead. Arden stood there in the growing dawn, looking at her son's legitimacy being questioned yet again, this time in front of thousands. And she realized that winning the hearing hadn't ended anything. It had just moved the battlefield. Arden ripped the notice down from the wall, crumpled it in her fist. Around her, the crowd shifted uneasily, some sympathetic, others openly hostile. A woman in the back shouted something about liars and whores, and Arden felt Tristan tense beside her. "Don't," she said quietly. "That's what she wants, a scene." "They're calling you." "I heard what they're calling me." She looked at the sea of faces, at the doubt and anger Naira had planted like seeds. "We need a different approach." Margaret appeared at her elbow. "The city guard is trying to remove the notices, but there are too many, and people are making copies." Of course they were. Scandal spread faster than truth ever could. Tristan was already moving toward the crowd, hand raised for attention. "Citizens of Thornmere, these notices are lies propagated by a convicted criminal." "Then why'd she escape?" someone yelled. "If she's so guilty, why isn't she in chains?" "Because she had help," Tristan shot back. "Help from people who benefited from spreading these falsehoods." "Or because she's telling the truth and you don't want us to know it." The crowd was getting louder, angrier. Arden watched it spiral and realized speeches wouldn't work here. Declarations from authority wouldn't convince people who'd already decided the authority was corrupt. She needed something else. "Margaret," she said suddenly, "get me a platform. A real one. Wood and nails, something that'll hold me 10 feet up." "My lady?" "And send runners to every quarter of the city. I want an announcement made. The Duchess will address the citizens personally at noon in the market square. Anyone who wants answers can come." Margaret's eyes widened. You can't possibly—" "Watch me." Arden turned to Tristan. "Can you keep the crowd calm until then?" "I can try, but Arden, speaking publicly like this is dangerous. If the crowd turns, then they turn. But I'm not hiding anymore." She started back toward the palace, then stopped. "And bring Edmund." "What?" "To the square. At noon. I want everyone to see him." "You want to bring a 3-week-old infant to a potentially hostile crowd?" "I want them to see what they're actually attacking. Not some abstract concept of succession, but a real child." She met his gaze. "Trust me." He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her face stopped him. "All right, but we're bringing extra guards." By noon, the market square was packed. Arden stood on the hastily constructed platform, just wooden crates stacked and reinforced, but it gave her height, and looked out at thousands of faces. Some curious, some angry, some already convinced she was guilty. Behind her stood Tristan holding Edmund. Margaret was on her right, a contingent of guards forming a perimeter. Not threatening, just present. The crowd's noise was deafening. Arden waited, letting it build, letting people see her standing there unafraid. Finally, she raised one hand. Slowly, reluctantly, the noise died down. "I'm not going to tell you I'm innocent," she said. Her voice carried. She'd learned projection from her mother, who'd managed a noble household through sheer force of personality. "You've already decided what you believe, and speeches won't change that." That got their attention. People had expected defensiveness, protestations. Not this. "What I'm going to do," she continued, "is tell you exactly what happened, every detail, and then you can decide for yourselves." She laid it out methodically. Naira's accusation, the hearing, the forged documents, the bribed physicians, the financial fraud, the escaped prisoner, the vial of poison found in her son's cradle. She didn't soften it, didn't make herself sound heroic, just presented the facts like she was reading a ledger. "The woman who posted those notices," Arden said, pointing to a crumpled copy someone was holding, "tried to murder my child, not because he threatened her, but because his existence threatened her plans for power. That's what this is really about, not legitimacy or truth, but control." "Why should we believe you?" A man near the front, arms crossed. "You've got power, money, guards. You could be making all this up." "I could be," Arden agreed. "That's why I brought proof." She gestured, and Margaret came forward with the strong box from Celia's estate. They'd brought a selection of the most damning documents, Naira's correspondence with bribed officials, receipts for payments made with forged authorizations, even a half-finished letter in Naira's handwriting outlining her plan to remove the obstacle of Edmund. These will be made public, Arden said. All of them, posted in every square, available for anyone to read. You want truth? Here it is. Verify it yourselves. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A woman pushed forward, middle-aged, work-worn hands, suspicious eyes. Let me see that, she demanded, pointing at the letter. Arden handed it down. The woman read slowly, lips moving, then passed it to her neighbor. It spread through the crowd like that, people reading and passing and reading again. This still doesn't prove your son is legitimate, someone called. Just that Naira's a liar. You're right, Arden said. It doesn't. So let me ask you something. What would prove it? What evidence would you actually accept? Silence. Because the truth was, for some people, no evidence would ever be enough. They'd made up their minds, and facts were just inconvenient obstacles. I've submitted to blood rituals, Arden continued, independent physician examinations, court investigations. My son has been poked and prodded and tested more than any infant should be, and every single examination confirmed what I've been saying from the beginning. He's the Duke's legitimate heir. She paused. Let that sink in. But if that's not enough for you, if you need something more, then I don't know what else I can offer, except this. She turned, took Edmund from Tristan, held him up so the crowd could see. Edmund blinked in the sudden sunlight, made a small sound of protest. He looked impossibly tiny against the backdrop of thousands of people, impossibly fragile. This is Edmund Hale, Arden said. He's 3 weeks old. He didn't choose his parents, didn't choose to be born into this mess. He's just a baby. And some of you are ready to call him a bastard, strip him of his birthright, ruin his life before it's even started, based on lies from a woman who tried to poison him in his sleep. Her voice cracked slightly on that last part. Not planned, just genuine emotion breaking through. So yes, I'm asking you to believe me. But more than that, I'm asking you to look at what's being done here. Look at who benefits from this chaos and division. Look at who's really being hurt. She lowered Edmund, held him close. The square was silent now, hundreds of eyes fixed on the small bundle in her arms. Then someone started clapping. It was hesitant at first. A single person, then another, then more. Not everyone, not even a majority, but enough. Enough to shift the atmosphere from hostile to uncertain to something that might, eventually, become support. The woman who demanded to see the letter pushed forward again. I believe you, she said loudly. My sister worked in Mistress Vale's household. She told me things, how that woman was always scheming, always calculating. I didn't want to believe it because... She trailed off. Because it's easier to think nobles are all corrupt than to sort out who's telling the truth. But I've read this letter. I've heard your words. And I believe you. Others nodded. The tide was turning, slowly but definitely. Arden felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief exactly, but the beginning of it. Thank you, she said to the woman. Your belief means more than you know. She descended from the platform, Tristan and guards forming a protective circle. People reached out as she passed, not threatening, just wanting to touch her sleeve, see Edmund closer, be part of the moment. Margaret appeared at her side. That was either brilliant or insane. Probably both. Arden shifted Edmund, who was starting to fuss. But it worked. For now. Naira's still out there. She'll try again. I know. But now people have seen us. Seen Edmund. That's harder to fight than abstract accusations. She glanced at Tristan. We need to follow through, make those documents public like I promised. And I want a full accounting of everything Naira did, published, and distributed. That'll take time to compile. Then we work fast. Arden stopped, turned to face him. This is the turning point. Either we control the narrative from here, or Naira does. I choose us. Over the next week, they worked systematically to dismantle what remained of Naira's influence. The documents were published, and scribes made copies that were distributed throughout the duchy. Arden gave 3 more public addresses, each one building on the last, each one more confident. The court faction that had supported Naira began to fracture. Some, like Celia, were arrested and charged. Others quietly withdrew their support, claimed they'd been misled. A few tried to pivot to supporting Arden, which she accepted with cool politeness and complete distrust. Dr. Halvern testified before the High Court, giving detailed accounts of how Naira had bribed him, threatened him, orchestrated the entire fraud. His testimony was damning, and when it was published, even Naira's staunchest defenders had trouble maintaining their positions. But Naira herself remained missing. Reports came in. She had been seen in a port city 3 days' ride south. No, she was hiding in the northern mountains. Actually, someone thought they'd spotted her boarding a ship bound for the eastern kingdoms. None of the leads panned out. "She's gone," Tristan said one evening, studying maps in his study. "Probably left the kingdom entirely." Arden sat across from him, feeding Edmund. "Maybe, or maybe she's waiting." "For what?" "For us to relax, to think we've won." She looked up. The poison vial wasn't her only backup plan. She's too smart for that. Even if she's planning something, she has no resources now. No allies, no money. We don't know that. We know what we found, but Nira was operating in shadows for years. She could have accounts we haven't discovered, allies we haven't identified. Tristan rubbed his eyes. He looked exhausted. "I can't live in constant fear of her. Neither can I. But I can be prepared." A knock interrupted them. Margaret entered, looking pleased. "My lady, there's someone here to see you. Says she has information about Naira Vale." Arden's pulse quickened. "Who?" "Lady Helena Morse. She was close to Naira years ago, before the falling out." Arden remembered the name, minor nobility, sharp mind, had distanced herself from court after some scandal. "Bring her in." Helena Morse was younger than Arden expected, maybe 30, with intelligent eyes and the kind of face that looked perpetually amused. She curtsied to both of them, then took a seat without being invited. "You have nerve," Tristan observed. "I've been told, but we don't have time for formalities." Helena pulled out a sealed letter. "Nira sent me this 3 days ago. I debated burning it, but decided you should see it instead." Arden took the letter, broke the seal, read. "Helena, I know we haven't spoken in years, but I need your help. The Duchess has destroyed everything I built, turned the court against me with lies and manufactured evidence. I'm in hiding now, but I have one final card to play. A truth that will shatter everything she's constructed. Meet me at the old lighthouse on the southern coast 3 weeks from now. Bring resources if you can. This isn't over." N. Ardeen read it twice, then handed it to Tristan. "It's a trap," he said immediately. "Obviously." Helena leaned back. "Naira assumes I'm still angry about what happened between us, that I'd jump at the chance to help her. She's wrong." "What did happen between you?" Arden asked. "She seduced my husband, ruined my marriage, then discarded him when she got bored. Left me to pick up the pieces." Helena's voice was matter-of-fact, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "I've been waiting years for an opportunity to return the favor." "So you're offering to help us?" "I'm offering to be your bait. I go to the lighthouse, tell Naira I've brought resources. You position guards around the perimeter. When she shows herself, you take her." Tristan was shaking his head. "Too dangerous. If Nira suspects, she won't. I'm a good actress." Helena smiled. "And I have very good reasons to want her caught." Arden studied the other woman, weighing risks against opportunity. This could be exactly what they needed, a way to end this permanently. Or it could be walking into whatever Naira had planned. "What's in it for you?" she asked bluntly. "Revenge, and the satisfaction of knowing Naira spends the rest of her life in a cell." Helena's smile sharpened. "Also, the Duchess's gratitude. I imagine that could be valuable going forward. Honest, at least." Arden appreciated that. "I need to think about this." "You have 3 days. That's how long before I'd need to send my reply to reach Naira in time." Helena stood. "Think carefully, Duchess. This might be your only chance." After she left, Tristan immediately started listing reasons why this was a terrible idea. Arden let him talk, her mind already working through logistics. "Could be working with Naira, leading us into an ambush." "She's not," Arden interrupted. "You can't know that. I can see it. The anger when she mentioned her husband, the way she wants revenge. That's real." Arden stood, began pacing. "And she's right. This might be our only chance. If we don't take it, Naira stays out there planning her next move. Or we're walking into a trap that gets people killed. Then we plan better, bring enough guards to handle anything, position them carefully, have contingencies." She stopped pacing. But we do this. We end this. Tristan looked at her for a long moment. You've changed. Have I? 3 weeks ago, you would have been afraid, cautious. Now you're planning raids and setting traps like a military commander. 3 weeks ago, I thought playing by the rules would protect me. Now I know better. She met his gaze. Sometimes you have to fight dirty to survive. He nodded slowly. All right, but I'm coming with you. Tristan, non-negotiable. You're my wife. This is my fight too. His voice softened. Let me help. Let me actually do something useful for once. She wanted to argue, but the look on his face stopped her. He needed this, needed to prove himself, to make amends, and maybe she needed to let him. Fine, but you follow my lead. Agreed. They spent the next 3 days planning. Helena sent her acceptance to Naira, worded carefully to sound eager but not suspicious. Tristan assembled a team of his best guards, people loyal to the duchy, experienced in combat, capable of discretion. Arden studied maps of the southern coast, the lighthouse, the surrounding terrain. It was isolated, which was both advantage and danger. Easy to surround, but also easy to ambush. She insisted on defensive positions, escape routes, signals for different scenarios. Tristan added his own tactical knowledge, and together they built a plan that felt solid. The night before they left, Arden spent hours with Edmund, just holding him, memorizing his features, the weight of him, the small sounds he made. You're going to be fine, Margaret said from the doorway. The plan is good. Plans fall apart. Then you adapt. You've gotten very good at that. Arden looked up. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. But if it does, promise me you'll protect Edmund, whatever it takes. Margaret crossed to her, took her hand. I promise. But you're coming back. You've beaten Naira at every turn so far. This time won't be different. Arden wanted to believe that. They rode south at dawn. Arden, Tristan, Helena, and 40 guards. They traveled fast, stopping only briefly to rest the horses. The weather held clear, and they made good time. Helena rode near the front, seemingly unconcerned. She chatted about court gossip, made jokes, acted like this was a pleasant excursion rather than a potential ambush. How are you so calm? Arden asked finally. Practice. I've been in worse situations. Helena glanced at her. You're nervous. I'm cautious. You're nervous, and that's smart. Means you're thinking about everything that could go wrong. She paused. But don't let it paralyze you. When we get there, you'll need to act fast. I know. They reached the lighthouse 2 hours before the scheduled meeting. The structure was old, abandoned, standing on a rocky outcrop above crashing waves. Perfect for privacy, terrible for safety. Tristan positioned guards in a wide perimeter, some visible, most hidden. They'd discussed this. Make it look like Helena had brought a few escorts, but have overwhelming force ready if needed. Helena would approach alone initially, then signal when Naira appeared. Arden took position behind a cluster of rocks about 50 yards from the lighthouse entrance. From here she could see Helena, but remain hidden. Tristan was on the opposite side, commanding the main guard force. They waited. The sun tracked across the sky. Waves crashed against rocks. Seabirds wheeled overhead, their cries sharp and lonely. Arden's legs cramped from crouching. She shifted position carefully, keeping eyes on the lighthouse. Then, movement. A figure emerged from the far side, cloaked, hooded, moving carefully. Even at this distance, Arden recognized the way she walked. Naira. Helena was already standing near the lighthouse entrance, clearly visible. She waved, called out something Arden couldn't hear. Naira approached slowly, cautiously. She was looking around, scanning for threats. Arden held perfectly still. The two women met, stood talking. Arden couldn't make out words, but their body language was clear. Helena acting friendly. Naira suspicious, but drawn in. Then Helena gave the signal, hand to her hair, a specific gesture they'd agreed on. Tristan's guards moved first, emerging from their hiding spots with weapons drawn. Naira spun, saw them, and ran. Not toward escape routes, but directly toward the cliff edge. No! Arden was moving before she thought about it, sprinting toward the lighthouse. Naira reached the edge, turned back with something in her hand. Arden saw it glinting in the sunlight. A knife. One more step and I jump, Naira screamed. I swear I'll do it. Everyone froze. Arden was 20 feet away, guards surrounding them in a wide circle. Tristan appeared from the other side, breathing hard. Naira, Arden said carefully. Don't. Why not? You've destroyed everything else. Might as well finish it. We can talk. Talk? Nira laughed, wild and broken. You humiliated me, destroyed my reputation, my plans, my entire future. What's left to talk about? You did this to yourself. You lied, you cheated, you tried to murder a child. Because I had no other choice. The knife wavered. You don't understand what it's like being a mistress. Never quite legitimate, never quite secure. Always one bad mood away from being discarded. I built everything I had through careful planning, and you destroyed it in weeks. You tried to steal my son's birthright. I tried to give my child a future. Is that so wrong? Your child doesn't exist, Arden said flatly. You were never pregnant, or you lost it and lied about it. Either way, everything you did was based on fraud. Naira's face crumpled. I was pregnant. Once. Briefly. But I lost it, and I knew if Tristan found out, he'd lose interest. So I kept pretending, kept planning, kept hoping I could make it real somehow. Arden felt an unexpected flash of something like pity, buried it quickly. You still tried to kill Edmund. He was an obstacle. Nira straightened, eyes hardening again. And don't pretend you're innocent, Duchess. You've schemed and manipulated just as much as I have. You're just better at hiding it. Maybe. But I didn't poison babies. No, you just destroyed lives politically. So much cleaner. Nira looked at the gathered guards, at Helena standing pale and silent, at Tristan. I have one final offer. You're not in a position to offer anything, Tristan said. Aren't I? Naira gestured with the knife toward her own throat. I jump or I cut, and your secrets go with me. The ledgers you recovered weren't the only copies. I have more, hidden where you'll never find them, set to be released if I die. Arden's stomach sank. Bluffing. Am I? Test me. They stared at each other across 20 feet of rocky ground. Arden tried to read her. Was this real? Did Naira actually have more leverage, or was this a desperate final play? What do you want? She asked. Safe passage. Out of the kingdom, with enough money to start over. In exchange, I give you the location of the remaining documents and disappear forever. No, Tristan said immediately. Then I jump, and your dynasty's scandals become public knowledge. Trade violations, bribery, treaty fraud. Imagine how your allies will react. Arden's mind raced. If Naira was telling the truth, those documents could destabilize everything. But if they let her go, how do we know you'll keep your word? She asked. You don't. But what choice do you have? Helena spoke up suddenly. She's lying. Everyone looked at her. She stepped forward, calm and certain. I know Naira. She's a planner, yes, but she's also a narcissist. If she had more copies of those documents, she would have used them already, used them to bargain before it came to this. Helena moved closer. This is a bluff. She has nothing. You don't know that, Nira's voice rose. I do. Because I know you better than anyone here. And I know that when you're actually holding power, you use it immediately. You don't save it for dramatic moments. Helena's smile was sharp. You're desperate, and you're hoping we're too afraid to call you on it. Nira's hand trembled. The knife shook. Last chance, she said. Let me go, or what? Arden took a step forward. You jump? You die? That doesn't hurt us, Nira. That just ends your story on your terms instead of ours. The documents don't exist, or if they do, we'll find them. We found everything else. Another step. You've lost. Accept it. Naira looked around wildly, at the guards, the cliff, the ocean churning below. Looking for any escape, any option, finding none. Her shoulders sagged, the knife lowered. I just wanted, she trailed off. I just wanted security. Was that so much to ask? Everyone wants security, Arden said quietly. But you tried to build it on lies and murder. That was your mistake. Guards moved in carefully, surrounded Naira, took the knife. She didn't resist, just stood there looking hollow. They bound her wrists, led her toward the horses. She passed close to Arden on the way. You think you've won, she said softly. But you'll always wonder. Every time you look at your son, you'll remember what I said. The doubt will eat at you even if you never admit it. No, Arden said, it won't, because unlike you, I know the difference between truth and lies. Nira smiled, sad and bitter. We'll see. They put her on a horse surrounded by guards. The ride back to the capital was tense but uneventful. Nira said nothing else, just stared at the road ahead with empty eyes. Helena rode beside our Arden for part of the journey. Thank you, Arden said, for calling her bluff. She was always a terrible liar when cornered, good at manipulation, bad at improvisation. Helena paused. What will happen to her? Trial, conviction, probably exile or imprisonment. She'll hate that. Nira always needed to be important, to matter. Being forgotten will destroy her more than any punishment. Arden thought about that. Good. They reached the capital 3 days later. News of Nira's capture had preceded them. Messengers sent ahead, and the city was celebrating. Banners hung from windows. People cheered as they passed. Arden felt disconnected from it all. Yes, they'd won. Yes, Nira was caught. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unfinished. The High Court convened immediately for Nira's trial. It was quick. Overwhelming evidence, multiple witnesses, no real defense. Nira stood silent through most of it, only speaking when asked to enter her plea. Guilty, she said, of everything except one thing. What's that? Lord Emmett asked. Lying about the Duchess's son. Nira looked directly at Arden. I never said he wasn't legitimate. I just implied it, suggested it, let people draw their own conclusions. But I never actually lied about that part. Because you didn't know the truth, Arden said. Exactly. I manipulated and schemed and bribed. I forged documents and planned murder. But I never lied about your son's paternity, because I genuinely didn't know, still don't. She smiled slightly. So in the one thing that started all of this, I was actually telling the truth. I didn't know. And that's what made it so effective. The judges conferred briefly. Then Emmett pronounced sentence. Nira Vale, you are stripped of all titles, properties, and protections. You are hereby banished from the kingdom permanently. If you return, you will be executed. Do you understand? I understand. They took her away. Not to a cell, but directly to the border under heavy guard. The message was clear: get out and never come back. Arden watched her go and felt something finally release in her chest. That evening, there was a formal dinner celebrating Edmund's confirmed legitimacy. The great hall was packed with nobles, all of them suddenly very supportive of the Duchess they'd doubted weeks ago. Arden moved through it mechanically, smiling, accepting congratulations, playing the role expected of her, but her mind was elsewhere, processing everything that had happened. Tristan found her on a balcony after midnight, looking out over the darkened city. You should be celebrating, he said. I am, quietly. He joined her at the railing. I'm proud of you. What you did, how you fought back, it was remarkable. I did what I had to do. No. You did more than that. You changed the entire system. He gestured back toward the hall. Half those nobles in there are terrified of you now. The other half want to be your ally. You've shifted the balance of power. Arden considered that. He wasn't wrong. She'd proven that a duchess could fight back, could win against terrible odds. The rules of court had shifted, and she'd been the one to shift them. Good, she said finally. Maybe the next woman in my position will have an easier time. Maybe. He paused. I meant what I said earlier. I'm sorry for all of it. I know you are. Will you ever forgive me? Arden looked at him, really looked, saw the guilt and hope and fear in his face, thought about everything they'd been through, everything that had broken, and what might be rebuilt. Ask me again in a year, she said, after you've proven the apology means something. Fair enough. He smiled slightly. Can I ask something else? What? What do we do now? Arden thought about Nira's final words, about the court's shifted power, about Edmund sleeping peacefully in the nursery under heavy guard, about the future they'd fought so hard to secure. Now, she said, now we make sure this never happens again. We reform the succession laws, establish better verification systems, create protections so no one can manipulate the system like Nira did. That'll make enemies. Everything makes enemies. At least this way, we're making them while doing something useful. Tristan nodded slowly. You've really changed. I had to. The world didn't give me much choice. She looked back at the city. But yes, I've changed, and I'm not sorry about it. Below them, the city slept. Above them, stars wheeled in a clear sky. And for the first time in weeks, Arden felt like she could breathe without waiting for the next attack. It wasn't over. It would never be completely over. There would always be threats, challenges, people who wanted what she had. But now she knew how to fight them, and that made all the difference. Arden stood in the square watching citizens tear down one of Naira's notices and immediately replace it with 3 more. A merchant was reading one aloud to a crowd, his voice carrying across the cobblestones. Witnesses silenced, evidence destroyed. We need to respond, Tristan said beside her. Issue a counterstatement. Explain what really happened. No? Arden kept her eyes on the crowd. Statements won't work. She's already framed this as the powerful silencing the truth. Anything we say will just confirm her narrative. Then what do you propose? Arden thought about the vial in Edmund's cradle, about the forged documents and bribed physicians, about all of Naira's careful planning, her networks, her contingencies. And she realized something. Naira's greatest strength is also her weakness, she said slowly. She plans everything, documents everything, keeps records of every bribe, every ally, every piece of leverage. She turned to Tristan, which means somewhere there's proof of all of it. Not just what we found at Celia's estate, everything. You think she kept evidence of her own crimes? I think she kept insurance against her allies, turning on her, against being caught, against everything. Arden started walking back toward the castle. She's paranoid, meticulous. She wouldn't trust anyone completely, not even Celia, so she'd have her own records, hidden somewhere safe. Margaret fell into step beside them. Where would she hide something like that? Not at Celia's. Too obvious. Not with any single ally. Too risky. Arden was thinking aloud now. Somewhere she had complete control. Somewhere she could access easily, but no one else would think to look. Her room's at court, Tristan said, but we already searched them, found nothing. Did you search everywhere? He hesitated. The guards were thorough. Were they? Or did they search like guards, checking obvious hiding places, looking for immediate threats? Arden picked up her pace. I need to see her rooms myself. Neera's chambers were in the south wing, overlooking the rose gardens. They'd been sealed after her arrest, guards posted at the doors. Arden dismissed the guards and stood in the doorway, studying the space. It was elegant, expensive. Silk curtains, imported furniture, artwork that cost more than most people earned in a year. Everything carefully chosen to project status and taste. What are we looking for? Margaret asked. I don't know yet. Arden moved into the room slowly, trying to think like Naira. She lived here for 7 years, had access to Tristan, to court gossip, to everyone's secrets. She would have documented it all. She started searching, not like the guards had, opening obvious drawers and checking under mattresses, but methodically. Looking for inconsistencies, spaces that didn't quite match up, furniture that seemed heavier or lighter than it should be. Tristan and Margaret joined her. For an hour they searched in silence, finding nothing. Then Arden noticed something odd about the fireplace. The mantel was marble, carved with intricate designs. Beautiful. But when she leaned against it, it shifted slightly. Help me with this. Together they pried at the mantel. It came loose, not broken, but deliberately removable. Behind it, set into the chimney wall, was a hidden compartment. Inside were leather journals, dozens of them. Arden pulled one out, opened it. Page after page of meticulous notes in Naira's handwriting. Names, dates, transactions. Secrets documented in careful detail. This is everyone, she whispered. Every noble who ever confided in her, every deal she witnessed, every piece of gossip she collected. She grabbed another journal. And here, records of her own activities. Payments she made, servants she bribed, physicians she coerced. Margaret was reading over her shoulder. Is that Lord Pembroke, the Eastern Trade Minister? He's been taking bribes from Naira for 3 years. Arden flipped pages. And here's evidence that Celia helped Naira fake her pregnancy symptoms. They practiced with the padding, tested different doctors to see who'd be easiest to bribe. There were 16 journals total. Together, they represented 7 years of systematic manipulation and blackmail. Everyone Naira had ever controlled, everyone who'd ever helped her, all documented in her own hand. Why would she keep all this? Tristan asked. It's incriminating. It's insurance, Arden said, against her allies abandoning her. If anyone tried to throw her under the cart, she could drag them down too. She looked at him. And now we have it all. They spent the rest of the morning reading through the journals, flagging the most damaging entries. By noon, Arden had a list of 43 nobles who'd been compromised by Nira in some way. Some had taken bribes. Others had shared confidential information. A few had helped her actively plot against Arden. We could destroy half the court with this, Margaret said quietly. I know. Arden stared at the list. It was tempting, so tempting. These people had stood by while Naira tried to ruin her, had whispered about Edmund's legitimacy, had chosen politics over truth. But destroying them wouldn't solve anything. It would just create more chaos, more division. We use it selectively, she said finally. The ones who actively helped Naira, Celia, the bribed physicians, anyone who knew about the murder attempt, they face consequences. She drew a line through several names. The rest, we keep the evidence, let them know we have it, and give them a choice. What choice? Tristan asked. Support Edmund's legitimacy publicly and completely, or face exposure. Arden met his eyes. I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in stability. These journals give us leverage to ensure both. It was ruthless, political, exactly the kind of maneuvering Arden had once despised. But she'd learned from the best. That afternoon, she called a meeting of the High Court. Not a formal hearing, just an emergency session. She brought the journals. The 3 judges arrived looking wary. Lord Emmett still seemed irritated by her directness yesterday. But when she laid the journals on the table, his expression changed. What are these? Naira Vale's personal records, 7 years of documentation, every bribe, every manipulation, every piece of blackmail she used to maintain her position. Arden opened one to a marked page, including evidence that several court officials took payments to overlook irregularities in her pregnancy claims. Kane leaned forward, reading. His face went gray. This implicates, I know who it implicates. And I'm bringing it to you first because you need to understand the scope of this. Arden pulled out her list. 43 nobles, 27 officials, 6 physicians, all compromised to varying degrees. If this becomes public, Petrus started. It won't, not all of it. Arden sat back. I want to make a proposal, a way to resolve this that doesn't tear the duchy apart. They listened as she outlined her plan. The ones who'd actively participated in Naira's schemes would face prosecution. The rest would be given a choice, public support for Edmund's legitimacy or exposure. And in exchange for their cooperation, the journals would remain sealed. You're asking us to sanction blackmail, Emmett said flatly. I'm asking you to choose stability over chaos. These people made mistakes, some of them serious, but exposing all of it at once would destabilize the entire duchy. Arden leaned forward. Or would you prefer I release everything publicly and let the pieces fall where they may? It was a threat, barely veiled, but she'd learned that sometimes threats were the only language power understood. Kane spoke first. What about Nira herself? Still out there somewhere. But without her network, without her allies, without her leverage, she's just a fugitive. Arden tapped the journals. Everything she built, every connection she made, it's all documented here. We dismantle it piece by piece, and she's left with nothing. You're assuming we can trust these people after forcing their cooperation, Petrus said. I'm assuming they'll value their positions more than their pride, which, from experience, is usually a safe bet. The judges conferred in whispers. Finally, Emmett spoke. We'll need to review the journals ourselves, verify the evidence. Of course. And the prosecutions. They'll need to be fair, actual trials, not show trials. Agreed. And Naira Vale. If she's found, she faces full consequences. No deals, no exile, actual justice. That's what I want too. Kane nodded slowly. Then we'll support your proposal, with conditions. They spent 2 hours working out the details. Which cases would be prosecuted publicly, which would be handled quietly. How to approach the compromised nobles without causing mass panic. What reforms would be implemented to prevent this from happening again. It was exhausting, technical work. But by the end, Arden had what she needed: official sanction for her plan and the court's backing. Now came the hard part. Over the next 3 days, Arden met with nobles privately. One by one, she showed them the relevant journal entries, explained the situation, made the offer. Some accepted immediately, clearly relieved to escape with their reputations intact. Others tried to bluster, to deny, to threaten. But the evidence was undeniable, written in Naira's own hand with dates and details that couldn't be refuted. By the 4th day, 38 of the 43 had agreed to publicly support Edmund. The remaining 5 were scheduled for prosecution, but the public notices were still appearing. Naira's propaganda campaign continued, her supporters posting new accusations daily. The crowds were getting larger, angrier. "We need to address this directly," Margaret said. "The private agreements aren't enough. The common people don't know what's happening behind closed doors." She was right. Arden had secured the court, but the streets were another matter. "I need to speak to them," Arden said. "Publicly. Explain what really happened." Tristan looked doubtful. "Public addresses from the Duchess are unusual. Nothing about this situation is usual." Arden stood. "Arrange it. Main Square. Tomorrow at noon. I want everyone to hear this." The next morning, a platform was erected in the main square. By noon, thousands had gathered. Merchants, craftsmen, servants, nobles, everyone curious to hear what the Duchess would say. Arden stood on the platform, Edmund in her arms, and looked out at the sea of faces. Some hostile, some curious, most just uncertain. She'd prepared a speech, had it written out, memorized. But standing there, feeling the weight of their expectations, she realized prepared words wouldn't work. They needed the truth, raw and unpolished. "Most of you don't know me," she began. "I've been Duchess for 3 years, but I've spent that time in the castle, managing household affairs, attending formal functions. I haven't walked your streets much, haven't spoken to you directly." She paused. "That changes now." Someone in the crowd shouted something. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was hostile. "I know what the notices say," she continued, "that I'm hiding the truth, that my son is illegitimate, that I've silenced witnesses and destroyed evidence." She looked down at Edmund. "And I understand why you might believe that. After all, why would Neravale lie? What would she gain?" She let the question hang. What she gained was everything. If Edmund was declared illegitimate, her child, the one she claimed to be carrying, would become heir. She'd rise from mistress to the most powerful woman in the duchy. Arden raised her voice. And to achieve that, she forged documents, bribed physicians, fabricated a pregnancy. When I discovered her plot, she tried to murder my son. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Good. She had their attention. "I have proof of all of this. Journals in Naira's own handwriting documenting 7 years of manipulation and fraud, financial records showing illegal payments, testimony from physicians she coerced." She gestured to guards standing nearby, who held up the evidence. "The High Court has reviewed everything. They've confirmed its authenticity." "Then why didn't you show us before?" someone yelled. "Because I was trying to protect people." The journals implicate dozens of nobles who were blackmailed or deceived by Naira. I wanted to give them a chance to come forward privately rather than humiliate them publicly. She paused. "But I'm realizing that protecting them cost me your trust, so I'm making a different choice now." She nodded to Margaret, who began distributing copies of key journal entries to the crowd. Not everything, some things were too sensitive, but enough to show the pattern of Naira's behavior. "Read for yourselves," Arden said. "See what she did. How she manipulated everyone around her, including the Duke, including me." She looked at Tristan, standing to the side of the platform. "Especially him." Tristan stepped forward. "It's true. I was blind to Naira's schemes. I trusted her when I shouldn't have. And when she made accusations against my wife, I doubted when I should have believed." His voice cracked slightly. "That was my failure, my weakness, and I apologize." The crowd was reading now, passing papers back and forth, murmuring. Arden watched their faces change as they absorbed the evidence. "I'm not asking you to trust me blindly," she continued. I'm asking you to look at the facts, to think critically about who benefits from which story. She held Edmund higher. This is Edmund. He's 5 weeks old. He's been examined by every physician in the kingdom. His blood has been tested. His legitimacy has been confirmed by the High Court. He's the rightful heir. What about Naira? Someone shouted. Where is she now? Fled, running from prosecution. But we'll find her. Arden's voice hardened. And when we do, she'll face trial for attempted murder, fraud, and treason. Not a political trial, a real one, with real evidence and real consequences. She could feel the mood shifting. Not complete acceptance, but the hostility was fading. People were thinking instead of just reacting. I also want to announce something, she said. The High Court and I have been discussing reforms to prevent this from happening again. New protocols for lineage verification, independent oversight of court finances, protections for whistleblowers who report corruption. She paused. These changes won't happen overnight, but they will happen. Because what Naira did, the manipulation, the blackmail, the fraud, it exposed weaknesses in our system, and we're going to fix them. That got attention. Real attention. Because suddenly this wasn't just about one scandal, it was about changing how the duchy operated. I know I can't make you trust me with words, Arden finished, but I can with actions. So watch what I do. Hold me accountable. And if I fail you, if I prove unworthy of this position, then judge me on that, not on lies spread by someone who tried to murder my child. She stepped back. For a moment, silence. Then someone started clapping. Slowly, others joined. Not everyone. Some people still looked skeptical, and a few walked away entirely. But it was enough. The tide was turning. Over the following week, Naira's support crumbled. The journal evidence was too damning, too detailed. Nobles who'd been posting notices quietly stopped. The crowds dispersed, and slowly, grudgingly, public opinion shifted in Arden's favor. But Naira herself remained at large. We've searched every port city within 200 miles, Tristan reported. No sign of her. She's too smart to use a major port, Arden said. She'll go through a small fishing village, somewhere she can bribe a captain without attracting attention. That's dozens of locations. Then we searched dozens of locations. They did. Guards fanned out across the coast, checking every village, every ship. And finally, 8 days after the public address, they got a lead. A captain in a village called Millport reported that a woman matching Naira's description had tried to book passage 2 days ago. He'd been suspicious of her desperation and turned her away. She'd left heading north. North meant the border, meant Naira was trying to leave the kingdom entirely. Arden assembled a pursuit team immediately, 20 guards, 2 tracking hounds, and herself. You're not going, Tristan said flatly. Yes, I am. It's too dangerous. Edmund is safe. Margaret's with him. I need to see this through. They argued for 10 minutes before Tristan realized she wouldn't back down. Fine, but I'm coming too. I was counting on it. They rode hard, following the north road. The tracking hounds picked up Naira's scent 3 hours out. She'd been traveling on foot, trying to stay off main roads. But she wasn't moving fast enough. They caught up to her just before dusk. She was in a small clearing trying to build a fire. When she heard the horses, she ran, but the guards cut her off. Within minutes, she was surrounded. Nowhere to go. Arden dismounted slowly, walked toward her. Naira looked terrible. Her elegant clothes were torn and dirty, her hair tangled, her face gaunt. She'd lost the polish, the careful presentation. What remained was desperation and rage. You couldn't just accept defeat, Naira spat. You had to destroy me completely. You tried to murder my son. What did you expect? He's not your son. Not really. You're just a vessel, a womb that produced an heir. Naira's laugh was bitter. You think winning makes you special? You're nothing. A minor house, nobody who got lucky. Maybe, but I'm the nobody who beat you. That landed. Arden saw it in the way Naira's face twisted. I was winning, Naira said. For years I was winning. I had Tristan. I had power. I had everything planned perfectly. Then you showed up and... She stopped, breathing hard. You weren't supposed to be a threat. You were supposed to be easy to manage. People keep underestimating me. You'd think they'd learn. Naira lunged then, pulling a knife from somewhere in her clothes. She was fast, But the guards were faster. They grabbed her before she got within 5 feet of Arden, wrestled the blade away. "You're done, Naira," Arden said quietly. "No more plans. No more manipulations. Just consequences." They bound her hands and loaded her onto a horse. The ride back was silent, except for occasional outbursts from Naira. Threats, curses, promises of revenge that rang increasingly hollow. By the time they reached the capital, word had spread. Crowds lined the streets to watch Naira's return. Some shouted insults, others just stared. But everyone came out to see the woman who'd nearly torn the duchy apart, brought low and bound. Arden didn't take pleasure in it. She just felt tired. They locked Naira in the high-security cells beneath the castle. The trial was scheduled for 2 weeks out, enough time to prepare the case properly. "Will you testify?" Tristan asked. "Of course. So will you." He nodded. "I need to. There's something I should say. Before the trial." They were in his study, late evening. Arden waited. "I enabled this," he said finally. "Not just by trusting Naira, but by being weak, by valuing comfort over integrity, by letting things slide because confrontation was difficult." He looked at her. "You deserve better. Edmund deserves better." "Yes," Arden agreed. "We do. I want to change, to be the Duke the Duchy needs, but I don't know if I can do that and be the husband you need." It was the question Arden had been avoiding. Could they recover from this? Should they? "I don't know either," she said honestly. "What I know is that Edmund needs both his parents, and the duchy needs stability. So we figure it out. Not because we love each other, that's complicated right now, but because we have responsibilities." It wasn't romantic, wasn't the reconciliation people would expect, but it was honest. "I can work with that," Tristan said. The trial lasted 4 days. Prosecutors presented the journal evidence, the financial records, testimony from Dr. Halvern, and multiple servants. They showed the vial that had been hidden in Edmund's cradle. Walked the court through every step of Naira's plan. Naira's defense was that she'd been manipulated too, that Arden had orchestrated everything to frame her, that the journals were forgeries. No one believed it. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. Treason, attempted murder, fraud, blackmail. Lord Emmett read the sentence. "Naira Vale, you are hereby stripped of all titles, properties, and privileges. You will be imprisoned for life in Blackstone Keep, with no possibility of parole or pardon. Furthermore, your family connections are severed. No one bearing your name may hold office or title within this duchy for 3 generations." It was harsh, comprehensive, designed to ensure Naira could never rebuild her influence. Naira stood there, staring at nothing, and for the first time since Arden had known her, she looked defeated, truly defeated. As guards led her away, she looked back once, met Arden's eyes. "You haven't won," she said. "You've just become me." The words haunted Arden for days afterward, because there was truth in them. She'd used blackmail, manipulation, political pressure, all the tools Naira had taught her, even if inadvertently. "Do you think she's right?" she asked Margaret one evening. "That you became her?" "No." Margaret was helping organize Edmund's nursery. They'd moved to new chambers, wanted a fresh start. "You used similar methods, but for different reasons. She wanted power for herself. You wanted protection for your son. Intent doesn't change the actions." "No, but it changes what you do next." Margaret folded a small blanket. "Naira would have held that leverage forever, used it to control people permanently. What will you do?" Arden thought about the journals still locked in her chambers, about the compromised nobles who'd pledged support because she'd forced them. "I keep my word," she said. "They supported Edmund publicly. The journals stay sealed." "And the reforms you promised?" "We implement them. Real oversight, real protections. Make it harder for someone like Naira to operate next time." Arden picked up Edmund, who was awake and fussing. "She's right that I used her methods, but wrong that I'm her, because I'm going to dismantle the system that made her methods necessary." It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious, but Arden had learned that sometimes the only way through was forward. The next 6 months transformed the duchy. Arden worked with the High Court to implement the promised reforms. Independent financial oversight, New lineage verification protocols, protections for people who reported corruption. It was slow, frustrating work. Nobles resisted change. Officials dragged their feet. Tradition pushed back hard. But gradually things shifted, and Arden discovered she was good at it. The same skills she'd used to survive Naira's attack. Careful planning, strategic thinking, understanding people's motivations, translated well to actual governance. Tristan noticed. "You're better at this than I am," he said one day, watching her negotiate a trade dispute. "I'm more patient. You want problems solved immediately. It's more than that. You see the systems. I just see the people." It wasn't a criticism, just an observation. And it led to a new arrangement, Tristan handling military and diplomatic matters, Arden managing internal governance and reform. They weren't in love anymore. Maybe they never had been, really, but they were partners, parents. And slowly, carefully, they built something functional. Edmund grew, started smiling, then laughing, then trying to grab everything in reach. Arden watched him develop and thought about Naira's final words, about what kind of world she was building for him. One evening, she was nursing Edmund by the window when Tristan knocked softly. "There's news," he said. "Naira's dead." Arden's breath caught. "How?" "Fever. Swept through Blackstone Keep last week. She was one of 7 who died." Arden should have felt relief or triumph. Instead, she just felt empty. "Does anyone else know?" "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first." She looked down at Edmund. "Don't announce it publicly. Just let it be noted in the records. She doesn't deserve any more attention." Tristan nodded and left. Arden sat there holding her son, thinking about a woman who'd planned everything except her own ending. 2 years later, Arden stood in the reformed High Court chamber watching as new oversight protocols were formally adopted. The chamber was full, nobles, officials, even some common citizens who'd been invited to observe. Edmund, now 2.5, sat on Margaret's lap in the gallery, trying to stay quiet and failing adorably. Lord Kane read the final provisions. These reforms establish that no single person, regardless of title or position, may operate without accountability. Financial records must be transparent. Medical examinations must follow standardized protocols. And any citizen may report suspected corruption without fear of retaliation. Applause filled the chamber. Not everyone was happy. Some nobles glared openly at Arden, but the measure passed by significant majority. After the session ended, Kane approached her. "This was your vision," he said. "You should be pleased." "I'm relieved," Arden corrected. "Pleased would imply I think we're done. We're not. This is just the start." Ever the optimist. But he smiled as he said it. That evening, there was a celebration. Nothing extravagant, just a dinner for the people who'd helped push the reforms through. Arden sat at the head table with Tristan, Edmund between them in a high chair, making a mess of his food. "He's got your determination," Tristan observed, watching Edmund stubbornly try to feed himself despite having no coordination. "And your stubbornness." Same thing, really. It was the kind of light exchange they'd developed. Not intimate, but comfortable. They'd never recover what they'd lost. But they'd built something different, something functional. Margaret appeared with wine. "A toast?" Arden raised her glass. "To survival." "To justice," Tristan added. "To not dying," Margaret said, and everyone laughed. They drank. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Arden allowed herself to relax. The immediate crisis was over. Naira was gone. The reforms were implemented. Edmund was safe and thriving. There would be new challenges. There always were. Some nobles would resist the changes. Others would find new ways to manipulate the system. Politics never stopped. But Arden wasn't the same woman who'd stood in the Grand Hall 5 weeks after childbirth, hearing her entire world challenged. She'd learned to fight, to plan, to use the system's own tools against it. She'd become powerful. Not in the way Naira had sought power, grasping, desperate, built on manipulation and fear, but in a way that was sustainable, based on competence, strategic thinking, and genuine reform. She looked at Edmund, who'd managed to get food in his hair somehow. In 10 years, he'd be learning governance. In 20, preparing to be Duke. And he'd grow up in a system with more protections, more accountability, more safeguards against people like Naira. That was worth everything she'd gone through. "What are you thinking?" Tristan asked. "That we did it. Not perfectly, but we did it." "Edmund's safe." "More than safe. He's going to inherit a duchy that's actually functional." She smiled. "Well, more functional. Thanks to you. Thanks to everyone." She gestured around the room. Margaret, the judges who actually cared about truth, the servants who testified, the nobles brave enough to support reform. "You're being modest." "I'm being realistic. One person can't change a system, but one person can start the change, and then build a coalition to finish it." It was the lesson she had learned through all of this. Not that she had to do everything alone, but that she had to be willing to start, and strategic enough to recruit others to the cause. 6 months later, a package arrived from an unexpected source. No return address, just a seal Arden didn't recognize. Inside was a letter. "Duchess Arden, I was one of the people compromised by Naira Vale. You could have destroyed me. Instead, you gave me a chance to support your son and reform the system. I wanted you to know that wasn't wasted. I've been working with merchant councils in the eastern provinces to implement similar transparency measures. It's spreading beyond the capital. What you started is becoming something bigger. Thank you for being better than you had to be." The letter was unsigned, but Arden recognized the handwriting from the journal entries. Lord Pembroke, the trade minister who'd taken Naira's bribes. She showed it to Margaret. "People are watching," Margaret said, "seeing that reform actually works. That accountability doesn't mean destruction. One letter means one person changed their mind. That's how movements start." Arden kept the letter, filed it away with other documents she was collecting, evidence that change was possible, that systems could evolve. On Edmund's 3rd birthday, the duchy held a public celebration. Not the stuffy formal affairs of previous years, but something open. Citizens were invited to the castle grounds. There was food, music, games for children. Arden walked through the crowds with Edmund's hand in hers, Tristan on his other side. People approached to wish Edmund well, to thank the Duchess for various reforms, to complain about things that still needed fixing. She listened to all of it, made notes, promised to look into issues. "You're working on your son's birthday," Tristan observed. "I'm governing. It's what I do now." "It suits you." It did. Arden had discovered she genuinely enjoyed it. The problem solving, the strategy, the slow satisfaction of making systems work better. She was good at it in ways she'd never been good at being just a duchess, just a wife, just an ornament. That evening, after Edmund was asleep, Arden stood at her window looking out over the duchy. Lights twinkled in the city below. Somewhere out there, people were living their lives, working, loving, struggling, surviving. And the systems that governed their lives were, incrementally, getting better. Naira had tried to tear everything down to rebuild it in her image. Arden was building something different, not by destroying but by reforming, not by manipulating people but by changing the structures that made manipulation possible. It wasn't perfect, it would never be perfect, but it was better, and that was enough. She heard footsteps behind her, Tristan carrying 2 glasses of wine. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Too much on my mind." Edmund's birthday? The new oversight committee? The Eastern Province trade negotiations? All of it. She accepted the wine. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Naira had won. If the hearing had gone differently. We'd all be worse off. Would we? Or would someone else have stepped up? Started a different kind of reform movement? You can't think like that. You can't second guess." "I'm not second guessing. I'm just wondering if I'm building something sustainable or if I'm just one person holding back the tide." Tristan considered this. "Maybe both. Maybe you're one person holding back the tide while building the seawall that'll protect everyone after you're gone." It was surprisingly poetic for him. Arden smiled. "When did you get philosophical?" "Around the time I realized my wife was reshaping the entire governmental system, and I needed to either catch up or get out of the way." They stood together in comfortable silence, looking out over the duchy. Not in love, not exactly, but partners, parents, colleagues in the complicated work of governance. And in the nursery down the hall, Edmund slept peacefully, safe, legitimate, heir to a duchy that was learning, slowly, to be better than it had been. Arden thought about Naira sometimes. about the woman who'd planned everything and lost anyway, about what she'd said at the end. You haven't won. You've just become me. But Naira had been wrong about that, because Arden had won. Not by becoming Naira, but by being someone different, someone who used power to build rather than to control, someone who valued systems over personal empire. The work would continue. There would always be new challenges, new people trying to manipulate the system, new crises to manage. But Arden was ready. She'd learned how to fight, how to plan, how to turn weakness into strength and crisis into opportunity. And more importantly, she'd learned that survival wasn't enough, that protecting her son meant building a world worth inheriting. Down in the city, bells tolled the hour. Midnight, a new day beginning. Arden raised her glass to the darkness and the light beyond it, to the work ahead, to the changes already made, to the long, complicated process of building something better, to surviving and then choosing to do more than just survive. She drank and turned back to the work. There was always more work,